Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this evening stream of comic goodness, where we're going to chat about a lot of things. A
A lot of
lot of
things.
a lot of very different I think we have very different titles, which amuses me, but we're simulcasting, by the way, for anybody who's confused how you're seeing us both places. We're
You
two
can see
places
us
at once.
everywhere. You can see us at all the places. Make sure you're watching on every one all at once. Now, you don't have
Multiple
to do that,
screens.
but you can choose. You have options, and I love that for everybody.
So we were saying when we were like all week when we've been texting, we just keep coming back to the same thing. I feel like we're just like, there's so many comics. Wow, there's so many comics to read. But it's
There's so many
true.
comics. There's too many comics, but also at the same time, like I don't want it to stop. Like I'm not complaining about it, but god damn, is there a lot of good comics right now? It's like,
There
what is
are.
this? Golden Age 2.0 or something. So I'm gonna make people mad saying that people are gonna be in the comments like, how dare you compare modern comics to the Golden Age?
I
Sorry,
don't know.
Golden
I've been
Age
seeing a
fans.
bunch of like comparisons, particularly with Absolute Superman, which we'll get to because we will talk about the
Legitimate
absolute stuff.
comparisons, honestly.
Yes.
And also honestly with Absolute Superman, I've been seeing some stuff too,
Yeah.
actually.
So should we hop in on the absolute side or should we just do a rundown beforehand of like what we've been reading overall? Because I know we both have
Yes.
big piles of things.
Yeah, we do. We do. We have big piles of lots of stuff. Also, I am Nick the Good. Thank you so much for subscribing. Happy 32 months. Holy moly. That's quite the streak. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. That means we're close to that cosplay stream, guys, over
Ooh,
on the
nice.
Twitch side. Yeah. Yeah, we only need like we at we only need like 8 more subs over there and
That's for
then we unlock
Zatanna,
our
right?
that's I'm raising funds right now for Zatanna on Kofi, but I
Mm-hmm.
do a thing where like if I reach a certain sub goal or members goal on YouTube, then I unlock some
Mm-hmm.
kind of fun stream for like the month. And so my
Mm-hmm.
first one that I'm doing this month, 50 subs on Twitch or 75 members on YouTube, unlocks my cosplay stream for the month. And
Mm.
people keep coming in and being like, Amanda, what are you gonna cosplay? And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to cosplay yet, but I have many things in my closet, so I've had some ideas. I'm thinking maybe I'll do Rogue with some Rogue Sun, with some, no, not Rogue Sons, with some, Sun, I can't remember the name right now. The game with the cards, and it's the
Midnight Sun.
team, Midnight Suns, Rogue Sons. I mean, look, if Rogue wanted to lead the Midnight Suns, I would read it, but I digress. I might do some Adam Eve with the visual novel game because I haven't played that yet. Or I might just
Mm-hmm.
do some more Poison Ivy with Lego because we were building I'm building like a Harley. It's like a
Oh yeah,
Jim
I
Lee
saw that.
Lego. Yeah, and you can
Mm-hmm.
change like the pictures. So I was working on Harley and I might do that again because honestly that was just really fun and I've I haven't worn my Ivy cosplay in so long, Sasha. It was like years, and now all of a sudden everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you have an Ivy cosplay." And I'm like, "I've had it for so long, guys. I just never wear it."
Well,
So
now's
that
the
was fun.
time. There's like big Ivy stuff happening. Like she had the Halloween special with Swamp Thing, and that was
I
really solid.
know.
So,
I still haven't read it yet, but I got a copy of it. I haven't.
mm-hmm.
My Halloween comics, I feel like I always read all of them in November. I'm so late.
You'll be
But
catching up by
yes.
the time we get to the Christmas ones. So,
Yeah, yeah. The Christmas ones will be like, I'll be in February and I'll be like, well, it's Valentine's. Time to read Christmas comics. Oh, yeah, the Poison Ivy ASMR is also a good vibe. This is true, Rapala. This is true. My like one ASMR like video on my channel. Look, one day we're going to have a whole ASMR channel and anyone that wants it can be there for it, but I know it's a polarizing thing. So, yeah. But let's speaking of Poison Ivy and
mm,
Poison Ivy comics and all of the her series, which I still have to catch up on as well.
hmm
What yeah, I know you have visual aids because you were saying
I do have some visual. Some I have about 10 because that's the amount it lets you load in the back at the same time before it starts making you choose. So I'm just like, that's why I asked you some of what you had read beforehand. So I'm like, so I can
Yeah.
have some covers of some things that we
I
can
love that
throw
we
up.
have so much different stuff. Like I feel like there's going to be stuff where there's going to be a moment where it's going to be like what is going on with that? And then we're just going to be like telling each other about this cool like
Mm-hmm.
you one of the ones that you picked that I'm excited to hear about is Something is Killing the Children
Yes. Mm-hmm.
because I have only read like 2 issues of that comic.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very like fresh. And I do want to read it. People keep asking me if I read it yet. And I'm like, no, no, no. I want to read it. There's too many things.
Month. There we go.
A little bit of lag,
Yeah,
but
my
we're
internet
good. We're back.
decided that it just didn't feel like it. It's like, no, we're not going to talk about that tonight on the stream.
Your internet is censoring you. Your internet's like, no, no, how dare
Well,
you?
it's gonna have to wait until we start talking about some of these other comics before it gets really deep into the censorship because of some of the stuff that we have
Some
tonight.
of the stuff that we have is, yeah, it'll be interesting how we discuss that. We're both
Mhm.
professionals at,
In code, like
yeah,
clearly, in
speaking
like in
about things in
YouTube
code.
code.
Yeah, the YouTube codes.
But I was
Uh,
saying for the internet tried to end me that was the book club book for that month. And right now, actually, if
yeah.
you're a member on either YouTube or Coffee, the vote is up for this November month. So you can
Ooh.
go, you can vote on the book that we're going to cover. And I think we have 3 really fun options. I mean, I'm excited to talk about any of them. So whichever one wins, I'm very excited to chat about it. So
What 3 are up? Can you
well,
tell?
right now I can say that Gotham City Sirens Volume 1 Union is what's winning. So we shall see if it maintains its lead. I mean, if it does, that's always a fun one to talk about. So we will see what the
That'll be
people
fun.
pick.
Yeah, I have to get caught up on mine. I mean, we're doing House of M over on OF, and then I
Mhm.
also I have to get my review up that people voted on for Wolverine Revenge. That's the one I'm doing on YouTube. And then I
Mhm.
need to finish up still The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, which is weird. It is weirder than I remembered it being, and
In what way?
it's just really weird. It's you know what? It's just really 90s. It's really
Mm.
90s. And I was even reading so I was catching up. One of the comics that we're going to be talking about today is Uncanny X-Men. So I was catching up on my Uncanny X-Men to make sure I had everything up to date, and I just went through the latest issue that came out. Um and I was like, "Man, moments of this are so 90s, but it's like rewarding, whereas sometimes I feel like when things are really 90s, they're like not
I
rewarding."
I think it depends on what one means by that because I like, there's like the 90s as it was, then there's the perception of like the 90s with like, so I think it depends what type
I think
part
the
of 90s it's
difference is
falling
that like I
into.
think Gail Simone is taking like some of the best elements that we had in the 90s, and there's some stuff that's like kind of goofy but in like a fun like comic book, like it's just bigger than it needs to be way. Whereas Adventures with Cyclops and Phoenix is like somewhat convoluted or just, but I mean, it's also for the sake I feel like of having some cool art, which
Mhm.
is something that I find happens in 90s comics that I both appreciate and sometimes I'm like, but why though?
So let's dive into some of what we have read and have been chatting with each other about back and
Yes.
forth. So I guess we'll start with the absolute Trinity because now that they're all out, we have all 3 and we
Mhm.
can discuss them as like a group and a concept and all of those things. I put up a poll actually to see like which one people were enjoying the most. And it was
Mhm.
interesting because as always, you have the split in between the vote and the comments, but also it's just like in terms of numbers on the vote, it was the order they were released in. So I was like, huh, I guess like that was a good release schedule for them. But in the comments, it was much more varied. And that really, I think, lent itself more to what people were expecting, what they were looking for, that kind of thing. So, how would you rank them, like personally?
So I think for me, I mean, went into this with a lot of hope for Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
I love Kelly Thompson. So, which I said that one time in a stream, and people were like, "Really? Do you?" And I was like, "I don't know if you've noticed like the Jeff
Yeah, you
plushies
have a
that I
Jeff.
have."
He's right there.
He's right here. I have a second one over there. I don't know. You guys can't see him. I have two. So I was like, "Yeah, I really like Kelly Thompson." I was like, I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about a little series called Black Cloak, also by Kelly Thompson. But I rave about that. So I was really excited for Wonder Woman, and that has been my favorite so far. It really did deliver, and I was really nervous going into it because then I had hyped it up so much that I was like, oh, what if it's like awful? Like then I'm just gonna be like really sad. But also, I mean, Absolute Batman is, I think undeniably, I think if I had to say what everyone should say is the best one, I would say Absolute Batman technically. But Wonder Woman has my heart, so that's my favorite. So for me, it goes Wonder Woman, Batman, and then Superman, which I still really loved, but I just think it's the least, like, has the least oomph of the three. So being a first issue, I feel like it's not quite as strong. But I do think Absolute Superman has the potential to, like, ramp up and maybe even beat the other two later. We'll see. What about for you?
So my order, and it's just, I feel like I have several orders for several different reasons because like I'm enjoying this initiative on a couple of different levels. On the one hand, I'm enjoying just the kind of energy and like the fandom around it, and I'm finding that very fun. Even the other day, I was out at a bookstore, and some people were in the comic section looking for like the absolutes. They're like, "Oh, they sound really cool. Like, I wonder where they are." And so like I poked them in the direction of the comic book store, and they're like, "They're over there," because they're so new. Because like they were looking for like, trades and stuff, because
Yeah.
clearly they were newer to it, so like they weren't sure like exactly where to go.
I
So I'm like,
love that there was someone looking for trades, and you were like, actually, it's like you're gonna get like an issue 1. Like, exciting. That's exciting.
so it's like it's fun to hear that people are into it. Like I was just listening to them like a creep, and they're like, "Oh, it sounds like really cool," and stuff. So I'm like, that's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying that aspect of it. There's the aspect of seeing which ones like my eldest daughter is gravitating towards is a separate level of enjoyment for me. And then there's my own like personal level of enjoyment. So if I'm ranking them personally, I think I'd go Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. If I was ranking them in general, I'd probably go Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman. So it's just kind of like the order that they came out in.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I agree. I think in general, I would agree with you. Like, it just in terms of if we're just looking at these, and I'm kind of taking my own personal feels out of it, that's what I would rank them as well, generally. How would you rank them in terms of art?
Ooh, that's difficult because I feel like they all had art that suited them.
Yeah.
Like I feel that the art for each of them matched them.
Personal preference, not based on the comic, I guess.
I probably like Nick Dragotta's work on Batman the most
Same.
out of them, but it's really close for Wonder Woman. Like there was some stuff in there, but especially with the monsters and stuff that I thought was really, really cool. And I liked those. Like some of those panels I stopped to look at. I was like, wow, this is just really nice and bright and vibrant.
That's so okay. So for me, I would have actually gone with Dragotta first. And then is it Manipal that's on Superman? Who's doing Superman?
That's a Sandoval.
Sandoval. Sandoval on Superman, and then I would go Sherman on Wonder Woman. Even though I love, like, all of them are great art, so that's not to put anyone down. We have to rank them, but I feel like sometimes too when you like put something at the bottom, people are like, "Oh, so that's the worst," and I'm like, "Well,
it's like no,
worst of the best," like still really good. Still, there's many other comics that I could compare it to and be like, "Oh, it's miles above this other comic that I really don't like at all." Not that there's many of that. There's not many of those for me right now. The comics that I don't like at all.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I enjoyed all of them. Like it was one of those things where for me, they were fun to read, but it was for different reasons for each
Mhm.
one. Like for Superman, I would definitely agree that I don't feel it had like a big wow kapow moment like the other ones did, but it had a lot of really solid callbacks and world building and the like that I thought was interesting, especially the way that was working in a lot of the pre-Crisis Superman stuff,
Mhm.
like from the Silver Age, from the Golden Age, those kind of things. I'm like, there were so many nods to Superman's lore, and just it was so deliberate in the way that it reworked things. So I was just kind of like, huh. So in that way, I agree that I think it could really grow quite strongly, even though as a start it doesn't have the whole like, oh man, like a guy's hand got chopped off and like he got shot in the face of batarangs, or like, you know, those kind of things like from the other. But it's like I don't know. Like we were talking a little bit about like because I know like you really loved Wonder Woman. Like I saw your video on it.
I watched your
And
video on it as
yeah.
well. I watched your video on it, and I think I watched your Absolute Superman because that one just came out. Ours kind of
Yeah.
came out like basically at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, but I haven't watched the Absolute Batman one yet. I gotta watch that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting actually to watch yours because um I love that we took such different things from Absolute
Yeah.
Wonder Woman, you know? Like that was really cool to me to be like, "Oh, cuz I was saying this actually. I was talking about this the other day and just how one of the things that I really appreciate about you just as a friend and like a fellow content creator is that we both like love comics and there are many times when you and I both love the same stuff. Like we'll be like, "Oh, this is
Yeah.
great." But oftentimes we love the same stuff for like different reasons or we'll see different things in it. So it's always
Mhm.
interesting because like I feel like whenever I message you about something, I'm just like I can't wait to hear what Sasha thinks because I know she's going to have like a different perspective. And she's going to bring up something and I'll be like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that, but that's really fascinating." So, it was very cool to watch your video on it as well.
No, I
But yeah,
appreciate that about you too, and it always makes it so fun to like bounce the discussions off of and stuff like that. I'm like, we're gonna talk about this for a long time, longer than we should.
longer than we should. Always longer than we should. But yeah, I mean, I think my one thing with that was the Wonder Woman Historia kind of vibes that I was getting from it that I
Mm.
really loved. And I mean, I've said this to you before. If you ever want to read some Wonder Woman Historia, we could do a whole discussion on Wonder Woman Historia. I love Wonder Woman Historia so much. For those that don't know, Wonder Woman Historia, various different artists for the 3 different books, all amazing artists on it. Kelly Sue DeConnick. It is a DC Black Label series that is kind of a retelling of the mythos of the Amazons, their history, kind of how they came to be. And obviously, because it's Black Label, like where does it sit in the main continuity? I have no idea. But it seems like Kelly Thompson is picking up some of the threads. And then something someone said in my comments was actually that when Kelly Thompson was interviewed, that she was saying that Wonder Woman Historia actually was a huge like really impacted her when she read it. So
Mhm.
it's definitely something that she is kind of inspired by with this run. So I don't
Mhm.
know what's going to be happening, but I had so many theories just based on it and I was like I just want to say I know it's not Wonder Woman Historia. I know that I don't even know where that exists in continuity, but you know, there's a lot of cool stuff that I feel like reminds me of it and the fact that Cersei has such a prominent role in it and gets to be the mother of Wonder Woman. You had some interesting things to say actually
I
about
did.
it's funny that relationship. I'm like crying on the page and then I watched your video and you're like, well, and it's like totally different perspectives. But you know, I'm also not a mother, so I think that's also really interesting too because you obviously have a different like I'm a daughter, so I have a mom and I have a connection to my
Mhm.
mom. But we have different perspectives just in life on that. So that was interesting. So what tell me give me the unhinged because I know you said
The
you toned it
yeah.
down a bit. I want you to just tell me what you really
Ah.
think about that.
Well, I said what I really think. What I did though was I tempered it through like the rationale of everything else because I am well aware of what the book is aiming for and what it's trying to do. And I think you always need to look at a book for what it's trying to do and through its own intentions. It's not fair to just completely let your own subject positioning override that.
Oh yeah,
so
fair. Yeah.
but
So you gave it an adjustment just because you were like, well, this is what the book is
because
trying to do.
sometimes it's like you have to acknowledge that you're reacting and it might be a you thing. And so like I've had a lot of thoughts and like talked, my husband's ear off about this more than he cares about. He's like, I'm so tired of hearing about absolute Wonder Woman. But Wonder Woman was the only one that had aspects that bothered me out of all of them. It's like there were some really high points, and it also ranks very highly because my daughter loved it so much. So it's like those things definitely I'm like, yeah.
I feel like she and I like the same stuff, honestly.
Like,
she and I are always
she
on
loved it.
Wavelength.
I know. But for me, I found the depiction of motherhood to be incredibly shallow and stereotypical. I actually found that it leaned into a lot of stereotypes surrounding motherhood and the perfection and shying away from the protective elements in ways, depicting them as negative, that makes it difficult to talk about motherhood and some of the complex feelings surrounding it, the different, like lots of the negative ones that I read lots of interviews that she was shying away from. And so it seems more like this was going for like a kind of dark fairy tale princess thing and less a kind of actual, we're going to do a nuanced take on what this means for Cersei and how this alters her life and the kind of feelings and the depth of them that could cause. And just a lot of because there was no pushback at any point. And I'm just like, children push you. And in this situation where she's on this island and she has all these questions and stuff, for that just not really to be a prominent factor, I found rung quite hollow, as was the fact that I just didn't find there was enough struggle at any point for Cersei's feelings in terms of like having her life disrupted and then coming to really enjoy that and then having to let that go. And especially the ending, which is a very powerful sequence. And I love that panel so much. I actually have it right here because I just love this panel. I think this panel is great. Let me see if I can pull it up and share it. There we go. Like, I love this one. I think this is such a cool like ending and everything. But there's a passivity to the text here that I found irritating. And I actually found that it lent itself towards this idea of there are certain stereotypes about motherhood and how women feel and about how men feel. And they're not always necessarily true, but there is some truth to the aspect of protectiveness that you feel as a mother. And I find that lots of times that's spun in a negative sense in lots of media. And I found that the kind of passivity of just like, oh, you just arm her and send her out there was kind of like rejecting how complex of a thing it is and how the urge you feel to protect and those kind of things. And I just would have really loved to have seen that be challenged and maybe spun in a more positive way. I also read a quote at one point where motherhood was described by her as an Ouroboros, which also just was perplexing to me in many, many levels. So like for me, it just didn't resonate. And so I'm just like, but I'm willing to acknowledge that I'm probably in the minority for that. It seems like a lot of people really vibe with it, but there were little things. And because of that, I looked at some other things differently, like how she was described like as a princess and how beauty was still such a prominent factor and just lots of things that for me, I was kind of like, I don't know. And I'm not saying I wanted them to be fighting all the time. Like, no, you don't get out of my room. Like, like none of that kind of anything, but just a bit more conflict and just the acknowledgement of how complicated motherhood is. Because for me, reading this, it was very much the stereotype of as a mother, you just fall into it and it completes you and it's perfect and you never have any other feelings again. You feel a little sad when they leave, but that's how it is and you did your best. And like, that's how I felt reading it. And it's like, maybe that'll change as the issues go on, and like they'll be, because this is the first one. And like I said in my video, in all fairness, this is trying to do a lot. Like it's trying to like set up like this backstory, this new world, like you have to pick and choose. You can't do everything. And so I'm willing to acknowledge that maybe this is just where I want the focus to be, or it's just because of where I am in my journey with like motherhood with my children and stuff like that. But just to me, it rang as very shallow. Yeah. And so I just can't really get into that aspect of it the same way. But the other parts I really enjoy, like the kaiju fighting and all like those kind of things. I'm like, that's fun. And I really like the look and I really like the concepts of what she's going to have to go and reclaim and those kind of things. And I liked this one also, like Superman, I felt had more of a dark side world kind of vibe compared to Batman, which I felt had the least of it out of the three.
Mm-hmm.
But that element, I don't like it. I actually, once I was done reading, I was like, I'm bothered. I was like, oh, like I'm actually bothered. Like I had to take a minute and be like, what's bothering me? Like, why am I bothered? So it's like
Yeah.
I thought about this for like quite a long time.
Honestly,
Like,
though, I feel like you make a lot of like completely valid and good points. Like when I was watching your video, like even when you were talking about this idea of Diana being so perfect, like from like infancy, like just she just exists and she's just a perfect like cherub baby that like
yes, and they even drew her that
nothing
way, which
can
I liked.
destroy her. She's indestructible, but she's also just kind to everything, regardless of how it treats her. That's just who she is. I like that element as well, but I also can see the problem that that can have, and this idea of just Diana being too perfect.
I just
Um,
I personally want her to have some conflict because I feel like that could reinforce the idea that her core is compassion, which I agree with and I think it's important. But I think it'd be really interesting in a dark side world to see her have to find that in the same way that it seems like Superman's going to have to find hope.
mhm.
Just like it's something that because the world is so different, they're the same, but they now need to like kind of like fight out to like,
Yeah.
kind of get there. But in Agonia, thank you very much. Hello, one for Amanda. Have you cosplayed as a Mortal Kombat character? And if you haven't, would it be too obvious to suggest Scarlet?
I've always wanted to do a Scarlet cosplay, actually. I haven't done Scarlet yet. I did do a Scorpion cosplay, oddly enough, a couple years ago. I did the whiteout contacts and everything. I have like a really cool mask, but then I had the look be kind of more of like the original like MK1 kind of look. So that was really fun. Honestly, I need more Mortal Kombat cosplays in my life. I also really want to do I want to do Natara as well, who is vampire lady. She's awesome. How do I do the wings? That's my question. Gonna have to figure that out. I'm gonna have to find someone for the wings. That's for sure.
Ben Chan, thank you very much. I think Thompson is leaning into Diana being a mythological character rather than a more relatable, nuanced person in the first issue, at least. And I would entirely agree with that. Like, I think so. Like, I got major, like, dark Disney princess vibes from, like, certain, aspects of it. And so again, that's why I didn't like make the whole review about that or anything. Is I'm like, I think part of this is a me thing. And like you can never, it's not fair to look at a work and be like, I want it to be this. And so it's bad. Because it's like that's not true. It's just like but there, even with that said, there are certain elements that inside of its own framework, I think it could have hit a bit harder that would have made it a bit stronger. But
I think that there's nothing wrong with saying though, like there's elements of the story that would actually enhance it if we explored those more. And I
mhm,
agree. Like I think as we go on, we're gonna get more of it.
I think so
But
too.
it is, I mean, yeah, the idea of Wonder Woman's mom being Cersei and that just being like a relationship that's just like, yeah, that's great. I'm like, interesting. Is it great though? Is it fully great? Because I feel like there is more to that, and hopefully we'll see more of it. I do
I
feel when
Yeah.
Diana reclaims the word Amazon,
Yes.
there was an apprehension in that scene that, although it's not said, I think the artwork really, really does a good job
Yes,
of
the
conveying
artwork I
this
feel like lifts that
tension.
scene
Yeah,
very highly with like her barely held back tears and those kind of things. Like in that moment, the feelings come through very strongly that the idea that this is something that she's had to like, kind of keep from her in a way, but it's just not played out in other parts of the narrative. And just like in general, Cersei, I feel like, especially because she's already a prisoner and all these things on this island, there's just I read a quote in my video about like shying away from like anger in the story. And I feel like the story could have used a tad more anger. And I don't mean like ridiculous, like,
yeah,
over the top, like I hate everything, like, but just a bit more shades of that because I felt like there was a little bit of like, like sullenness and stuff in Superman. And there was a kind of bit of
mm,
like sass and brashness in, you know, Batman. And I'm like, I like that. I like when there are like little flaws, like things that they kind of need to overcome. It makes them, in my opinion, come across as more heroic, you know, in the long term.
I think it's also interesting with Absolute Wonder Woman because we're kind of seeing more of Diana, like, as she, like, I feel like with that character, that's the one that we see the most in terms of like through the years. Not that we
Yes.
don't see a little bit of it with Absolute Batman. Obviously, we have some flashback stuff. We see a little bit of it with Superman. The least
With,
I would say is with Superman, personally, at
mhm.
this point. But so I think it's hard because I feel like her as an adult and her, you know, in like man's world, like outside of hell, like I still feel like we don't really have a good read on like who she is now. So
And
I'm
it's
interested to
I'm
see
interested in that
what we
too.
see.
And it's like I said, like this is going to be one, like this book, and part of why I really love it is like my daughter is now asking me, like, we have to go every month, like we have to go to the store and like get this book, and I'm like, that's awesome, you know,
That's so
like
great.
that's really great, and that makes me
Yeah.
really happy. So
Yeah. I
like,
mean, and I think that is the power of, you know, dark like fairy tale princess vibes
mhm,
is that you can really pull in um a lot of readers, especially I think young readers, it's going to appeal to. And it does feel very kind of archetypal in a lot of ways
mhm,
what is being done with that book. I think that is going to be intentional. And I hope
mhm.
though, because we really got to read you got to read Wonder Woman History. We got to talk about this book because I think you're really going to like it. Because there's a lot of like, you know, women, there's a lot of nuance, I would say, in
Mhm.
that book, and a lot of tough, you know, stuff that
Yeah.
they deal with that is like, like just brutal and terrible and great. And I hope we get more of that because, you know, hell is hell and it should
Hell is
be
hell, yes.
hell is hell. It should be hell. And, you know, although I love that they had their little home and it definitely made me tear up to see, I love
Well,
the panels where we're going through and
and you
watching
see it
like
gets
as the
more and more stuff
time
and become more and
evolves.
more like homey and stuff, like
I was like, oh, you guys, you're killing me in the best way. It's
it's
making
like
me
for
tear up
me,
just thinking about it.
I'm like, or like my daughter's opinion is the most important. I'm like, forget all of my things. Like that's, you know, that's the paramount opinion, like the opinion of the youth and people getting into it and being inspired. I'm like, that's what
Yeah.
it's about, you know? Lane Kramer, thank you very much. Casually
Thank
love the
you.
White Rabbit video from DC. That was fun to make. That was very fun to make. Maybe we'll do Marvel White Rabbit next. She's been popping
We
up in
should.
things, you know?
She yeah, she pops up all the time. She's a great character that pops up. Honestly, we need more White Rabbit across the board. You can never have too much.
But
DC
you've read more Wonder Woman than me because you have
I
also
have.
been on top of the mainline series
I
as
have.
well.
I've been reading Tom King's Wonder Woman. When it came out, I was intrigued. I read issue 1. I liked it. And then I kind of was like, yeah, like maybe I'll check this out. And you know, it was Uptown Duck who was like, you really got to read this. Like this is like a book that is like for you. Like this is for Amanda book. And so I was collecting it for a while and then I did my reading week where I just did a week of streams where you could come in and we basically like focused for like 20 minutes, then we'd have 5 minutes of chatting and I was just
Mhm.
reading through all these books. To some people's chagrin, there were some people that really did not like those streams and some people that really loved those streams. I loved them because they allowed me to catch up on some of my
Yeah.
reading and I read all the Wonder Woman and I'm finally up to date and it's so good. And I love one of the things that I loved about you know, Absolute Wonder Woman is that I also saw some parallels between Tom King's Wonder Woman, but
Mhm.
like different. And I think I was saying in Absolute Wonder Woman, there's this thing that she says that seems like it's almost like a catchphrase. And Tom King's Wonder Woman, what that is no thank you. Diane
Mhm.
always just says no thank you to people. And I have been loving it. I just read issue number 14. Do I have it here? This one, the story is literally called like what is the point? This is the Trinity origin story I hear. It's called What is the Point of Steve Trevor? And I was like, Tom King, you see me, don't you? I have never liked Steve Trevor. This comic has actually made me like Steve Trevor,
That
but I
truly
just
is an
turned to the
accomplishment.
I turned to the page and I was like, Tom King, are you talking to me? What is the point of Steve Trevor? I'm still not fully convinced on the answer that we get in this issue, but you know, I will say that each issue that I get of this Wonder Woman that has Steve in it makes me see more the appeal of Steve. But you know, I've always been a fan of just Wonder Woman either like being with ladies on Themyscira because I'm like, well, I mean, it's an island full of ladies. I mean, ladies could just be with the ladies, or Wonder Woman just being on her own because she's so strong as a character by herself. But you know, just because she's strong by herself doesn't mean that she doesn't need anyone. And that whole idea of this issue, in terms of what they discuss in it, is this idea that you know, Wonder Woman is kind of like the sun, and Steve is kind of like her shadow, and you know, you need to have that shadow for the sun to kind of be as mighty as it is, to kind of radiate outwards. And in a way, how Steve tethers her. And I was like, okay, that makes some sense. I can
It
get
gave
it.
you some fondness for Steve.
He gave me a bit of fondness. Gave me a bit of fondness for Steve. You know, I'm not too sad about what we're doing with Steve in this. But I I can understand that just because Diana is I like the idea that just because Diana is a strong character and is kind of this perfect person, that she still has things that she needs, and she is still like a person, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard because Wonder Woman was a character I actually, of the Trinity,
Mm-hmm.
I liked her the least initially. Like when I started getting into comics and was working at Top 10 and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
I thought Wonder Woman sucked. I thought she was just this perfect woman, and how does that speak to who anyone really is? I mean, you know, I've always been a big fan of villains,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I really love women that are evil because I think it allows women to kind of be free in a way that they don't often get to be in stories, where they have to be this like perfect, compassionate, nice, like, okay, okay. It's kind of boring. But with Wonder Woman, she is really complex. And what I love about her is that just because she is this like ideal woman doesn't mean that um, she really is ideal, and that she doesn't have these very real, very human struggles. And that
Mm-hmm.
is something that this series has been doing a great job of. This idea of also Wonder Woman not wanting help. She doesn't know how
Mm-hmm.
to ask for help, this woman. And I was like, oh, I feel very seen in this depiction of her. So it's been a great run. And I mean, the art is great. And I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
paneling is great. Like, I just love what Tom King does with his layouts in his scripts. I think that the layouts are so good. Or, you know, him and his probably, like, you know, it's probably a collaborative thing. But I do feel like when you read Tom King, it always has a very specific look that you can just tell from the layout. Like, oh, this is Tom King. So,
Mm-hmm. Are
yeah.
the Trinity backups still going, or has she broken off now? She's getting her own series coming up.
Trinity backups are done.
Well,
I'm so
Trinity's getting her
sad.
own series though,
I know, I
so
know.
the
I got the Trinity book because I was getting all the Wonder Woman, and then it was like, well, you should definitely get the Trinity book, and I was like, okay, I'll get the Trinity book. But it's just a collection of backup stories. So if you guys have
It
seen
is.
this and
They're
you
all
want
like
it,
together, and they reordered them so
yeah.
that the way she's introduced is a bit like different than how it was initially. So
But it's still, I feel like it's a good like collector's item to have, and I love the cover with
the
the
cover is
corgis.
cute. Yeah, the like kind of Robin homage almost with the corgi
I
coming out
mean,
of it.
this, yeah, literally this is John, and this is
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember his name right now. Everything's
Damien.
leaving me. Damien, yeah, as corgis. And I love that. And and it does have a little preview at the end for the
Mm-hmm.
Trinity
Yes.
series coming, which I will be reading because I do love Trinity.
I
Even
am
though
just intrigued by the fact that
we
they
have so
brought back
many,
the three of them at the same time. I'm like, somebody cares about those impossible tales where Wonder Woman, Wonder Girl, and Wonder Tot existed at the same time. My
I
goodness.
loved it. I was like, wow, I can't believe we're doing this again. I'm so excited. I love that we're throwing back to the times when we used to do that and it was weird. And they're like, yeah, we're going to do it and it's going to be weird. And I'm like, yeah, it should be. Great.
Did you ever feel any whiplash when the backup was there in between like the tone of the main story and the backup stories?
Um, like you mean going from the main story to the backup story?
Yeah.
Like whiplash in what way?
Emotional whiplash.
Yeah, I mean it's an emotional read. I will say Wonder Woman throughout both the stories are emotional reads. I feel like Trinity can be kind of light though because there's a lot of humor, whereas with
Mhm.
Wonder Woman, the humor is very light in Wonder Woman. It's there. It's sometimes there. You need it to like survive. But Wonder Woman is pretty intense and Trinity can be intense but is also very cute and very like funny.
I found that a
But
bit jarring, a little bit, like,
it
just
can
because you would get
be a bit
into, like,
much.
the vibe, of the first one, or like, "This is what we're doing," and then, like, the backup was like, "No, it's fun," and I was like, "Oh, hold on, like, I think I need to read this, like, later separately."
Yeah, I mean, I think that even just the main story, this is also like a book that I just can't believe the price for the book because I feel like you get so much for what you pay. Um, but the even the main stories, I've had to take breaks from reading the main stories. Like I've had to step
Mhm.
away to just be like, okay, I just need like a second
Yeah.
to like not be in this because it's getting really intense and I'm getting really like I'm like biting my nails, like reading the comic,
Yeah.
turning the pages. So, I mean, that's a great experience to have. But yeah, I can understand the whiplash moments. I think for me, the Trinity stories, though, were always like the
Like
little
a
sweet
breather.
dessert at the
Yeah.
end. Yeah. Like I was like, I made it through the main course and it was a lot. And now I can just enjoy a little Trinity story. But sometimes they also pull at your heartstrings. And even the cuteness sometimes makes me like cry. I don't know. Everything makes me cry though. That's just who I am as a person.
I cried a
So,
lot recently because I went to see The Wild Robot, so that was my crying for the
oh,
week.
yeah. I cried for like literally I think 30 or 40 minutes straight in that movie. Like I don't think I stopped crying.
I would get it together and then something would happen, and it was so funny because me and my daughter were leaving the theater and the attendants there, and it's like, "How was it?" We're just like puffy eyed. Like, it's like, "It was good though."
it was yeah, it's really good, but it's very emotional. It is yeah, Wild Robot is literally wild in terms of if you want to go to a theater and have an emotional response.
Bring some tissues and be glad it's dark and you can.
I I also just saw We Live in Time recently, and that's another one
Oh,
that
how
I
was
was
that?
like, it was really good, but it's another one where I'm just like, I should have brought like a whole box of tissues with me to this movie. I need to just travel with boxes of tissues in my bag when I go to see movies, just in case,
Because you
because you
never
never
know.
know. I thought Wild Robot was going to be uh, uplifting. I mean, it is uplifting, but I thought it was going to be a different vibe than what I got. And then I'm not mad about it. I was very happy. I was very sad. I was very happy to be very sad. But
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
and same with We Live in Time. Ultimately as well, I feel like it has a really good I mean, it's talking about like cancer and loss and all of that stuff, but it really is focusing on living your life
Mhm.
and not like the death part as much. Like that's a
Mhm.
part of it, but it's really like trying to just highlight those moments in life. Um and so that is something that is really admirable when you can take a story that's like really sad, but then, give someone something where they're like, "Oh, like it's going to be okay."
Mhm.
That's nice.
That's
And Wonder
uplifting.
Woman, I think we're working towards that, but it's still pretty rough, man.
Moon Princess TSH forever. Thank you very much. It is appreciated. So, what else did you read? Because I have a bunch of I read a bunch of All In. I'm kind of like quietly going through like pretty much all the All In things. I don't talk about all of them, but there were a few this week that I like stood out to me a little bit.
Yeah, I
They
mean,
were I
that's
like
my only
JSA.
all in.
Why is
So,
my
yeah,
JSA so blurry?
JSA.
Get off the screen, blurry JSA. You don't belong here. Why was it so sad? It was high quality when I uploaded it. It got compressed when I made a PDF. That's so
Oh, the
sad.
PDF. The PDF.
The PDF killed it.
Curse you, PDFs.
Oh,
How was JSA actually? I haven't really I haven't really been in the JSA space at all. I knew it was
okay.
happening. I
So
heard
for
people
those who
getting
don't
hyped
know,
about it. That's it.
JSA is relaunched. It's number one again with Jeff Lemire writing and Diego Olortugui
Was Jeff
on the
Johns
art.
doing it before?
He was, but then with
Right.
all the Ghost Machine stuff and all of that, so like all those people are now exclusive to Ghost Machine and doing their thing over there. And so Jeff Lemire is now doing the JSA, and I really, really loved it. It definitely took the approach of, if you picked up the JSA book, you probably know who the JSA are. So it very much hit the ground from that standpoint of, like just a bunch of characters already in the thick of it, like fighting, like, that kind of stuff. Like a bunch of the older JSA are missing, like the younger team have to get them. A bunch of them are having all this relationship drama, like right out the gate, like, like they're arguing and all kinds of things. There were a couple of moments where I think it could have used an editor's note, because there were a couple of things that they referenced that were like, when we had the opportunity to get my powers back, you took mine, and like all this kind of stuff. And it's like, that could have used like a little editor's note to like, this happened in absolute power, like number, like, whatever.
Right.
But
where have all the editor's notes gone though, Sasha? I feel like they've many of them have left us at this.
And sometimes like just little moments like that, especially because absolute power and stuff just happened. But overall, it was fun. It didn't have too many moments of, overt exposition, although there were some. Like there was one argument between Jade and Obsidian where she was like, Obsidian, you're my brother. And because it's like, probably because maybe people don't know that Jade and Obsidian are brother and sister. So they did have a bit of like, Jade, like, Obsidian, you're my brother and I care for you, but also this decision that you're making is like, so
see, to me it's like I understand you might need to tell people that because they might not know. I mean, I'm not big into JSA, so I wouldn't know nothing. I probably don't know too much about it. I only know a little bit. But I don't know why it has to be said quite like that. That's just not how people speak to each other usually.
It's not. It was like, there weren't too many moments like that, but that one I was like, But overall, it was really like fun and action packed, and it set up like a whole bunch of things they're gonna have to deal with. That was like, oh, okay, so it's gonna be this kind of like soap opera, like drama type book. It felt like you were kind of coming in like the middle of a run, which I don't hate at all, but like it depends. Like if you find it interesting and the characters look interesting to you and stuff, like I can see you finding it exciting, but I can also see it being kind of like a whoa, like I don't know who these people are. Like I don't know what's happening at the moment, But I see like some people are saying like,
honestly,
yeah, some people are saying it was their first one.
Yeah, so some people, it was their first comic, their first JSA.
So that's good to hear. And like, you liked it. That's cool. Like, cause I thought the art was really fun too. And they did some really cool stuff with, the Obsidian art with the shadows and stuff at the beginning that I really enjoyed, where it just looked really creepy. I like Obsidian a lot, and I feel like he doesn't get enough play or attention. So I was like, yay, Obsidian things and just JSA things. And it was really fun. And I was like, I'm glad to see that team again. And I was also just excited to see that they're taking more risks with putting some characters out there who aren't Batman or like, and really letting people work on who they want to work on, which I think is fun. And I think you're seeing that come through in terms of like the books,
I hope it keeps going because I'm loving it. And I do feel there is this like beautiful synergy right now at DC where it's like, we're just letting people do things they want to do, and we're all just supporting each other to make cool stuff. And I was like, this is like weirdly great, like not weirdly great in the sense that happening would be great, but more just the fact that it's happening, because I do feel like DC can sometimes be a company that gets in its own way a little bit. I mean, I think both of the big two do this, get in their own ways, but it feels like we're really entering this era. Like the All In initiative is really giving me so much like hope of just like, is everything at DC just going to be amazing? Because that would be great.
That would be really great. That would be fun.
And then everyone can read everything. And there's so many people, I feel like right now too, that are coming into comics. I mean, more than I feel like I've seen in a while. And not that that hasn't been a thing, because although I think a lot of people are under the idea the comics have been dying, the stats actually have only said the opposite through all like of pretty much time, other than like obviously when we almost went bankrupt, that was a whole thing, obviously. But in modern days, it's only gone up. And so I'm very interested to see, like, after this year and moving into next year, what that does for numbers and sales and just the number of people that are going to be reading, because Yeah, I think it's going to be booming. I know a lot of people right now too that are just like, I haven't been reading in so long and I'm
Hmm.
coming back, or like I've never read anything and I'm just really excited to jump in and feeling empowered to jump in, which is
Hmm.
really cool
It's
because
nice to hear people talking about how they're planning to go for a while as well. They're like, as long as you keep buying it, we'll keep writing it, which I am a huge fan of, long runs and stuff like that. And I hated when they got rid of
please.
legacy numbering and stuff. Like, I really love it. I love just seeing that continuity and just because when you see that, it feels like, yeah, there is staying power and people do have ideas for these stories that go beyond like 6 or 12 issues. And
Hmm.
so it's really exciting to see that. Another company that's really going in hard on that. Like there are a couple like Titans doing that with Conan, with
Yep.
just like we're going to be doing this like for a while. Ghost Machine is doing that with its ones as well,
Hmm.
where they're planning like up to 50 issues. Like they were talking about that the last con, like for each thing. And I'm like, that's super like awesome. It's really
Yeah.
exciting and just it speaks to a belief in the product, which I appreciate because I feel like sometimes comics aren't as confident in themselves as
Yeah.
they should be, in my opinion.
100%. I feel like Radiant Black is another one that just feels like it has so much just like looking into the future and really just like having this long like over at the Massiverse. That's another one that I love that just
Hmm.
like I don't know when we're going to ever go back to. I hope we never go back to one. Who needs one? One is done. That already happened. That's a collector's item now. Because it is true when you and I mean there's so many characters that I love and then when we reset it I'm like but why? Like it was so and not that there's anything wrong with a limited run or something like if you have a story that's 5 or 6 issues and that's it, like get in, tell your story and get out. That's all you want to do, so it's okay. But I don't love when we have a story and it's going and the momentum and everything is there and then they're just wrapping it up because they got to start one again because they want to
Hmm.
sell those ones and you can tell. I mean, one of the things that I need to catch up on my Scarlet Witch, but that's a
Hmm.
series that I remember when they were like, and then we're gonna do Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, so we're gonna end this. And I was like, oh, that's sad because I was really enjoying like this team, and then it's like, oh, well, like Steve Orlando's still gonna be writing it, and I was like, oh, okay, why are we like, why are
Like, why
we?
not just have it? I get what you're saying.
Why
Like, why
not
not just have
just
it be an arc
continue?
inside
Yeah,
of the Scarlet, thing that's
yeah,
already
why do we have to
going?
retitle and then I was like, okay, well maybe that's like the end of the run, like maybe that's going to be the big send off. And then they were like, we're going to do Scarlet Witch after that and it'll be number 1. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we'll see who's writing that and if I want to read it. And it's Steve Orlando. And I was like, I mean, great. That's great because I'm enjoying it. But why are we renumbering this? Like we're just renumbering it to sell it. And the thing is that I think we underestimate as well the ability of people to not be afraid that something isn't a number 1. Like just because
Hmm.
it's not a number 1 doesn't mean you can't read it. It could be like number
Hmm.
582, but it could be the beginning of a new thing. So like who cares that it's 582? Just start there. See if you like it.
And
And
it's like
if
it's
we
a
had
lot
more
easier.
editor's notes, then everything would make sense
It's true, you'd know
anyways.
where to go.
You
It's
know where to
also
look.
easier these days now to, like, look up what you're not sure of, and, there's lots more trades and the like too, so it's like there's just lots of different ways to consume the material now. It is interesting to see so many people flocking to floppies because I feel like that hasn't happened, like, quite as much. It's definitely not my natural inclination, personally, like, you're much more of a Wednesday warrior than I am. Like, my tendency is definitely to wait for trades.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, we have the pull list and go and get all the things and it is it is a whole to do. And my one problem is that like I just don't have space for all the comics that
Mm.
I want and that's where I mean, I did get a trade recently though. I
Ooh.
did. I got a new trade. That's an old, well, not that old, but it's older. I got Dead Boy Detectives and I read this.
Mhm.
By Pornsak Pishiot, who's going to be doing something in Absolute actually. I don't know if the book has been announced. Has the book been announced for that? Someone in chat probably knows what I'm talking about. Someone probably. Do we know? I'd have to look it up. But I read this. This was pretty good. This has got like crazy art. because the Dead Boy Detective show was canceled, and then
Yes,
I was
and you've
talking
been
about that.
talking about that.
Been talking about that, and that show was really good. And so then I was like, I need to jump in on this. And when this series came out, like a year or two ago, I was really interested in it because I love Sandman. And then I was just like, okay, I'll finally read this and see what it's like. Very different from the show, by the way, but
Mhm.
still very cool. Dealing with a lot of cool ghost lore and mythology, which I love. I love when we get to learn about different types of little ghosties. No, it
Mhm.
hasn't been. It hasn't been announced yet. The Flash. I don't think he's doing the Flash. I think it's one. I think it might be a book that's not announced yet. The Flash is Lemire. Is Lemire
Yes.
doing the Flash?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Robles is on art. Thank
Yes,
you. I
it's something.
I had a delivery because we were talking about like floppies, like, oh, you got a trade. I actually bought a bunch of floppies lately. And I was like, oh, we're here. Like, might as well, oh, it is Spurrier. Might as well, show them off. I did a Star
Yeah, show
Trek
them
haul,
off.
which it's been quite a while. Like for those who've been here for a while, they know that I have a Star Trek box, but it's been kind of light on the comic front. So like I went and there
Oh,
was a sale. Somebody was
for
selling a
next
bunch
gen.
of these for like $3 each. And I was like, nobody loves them, like nobody wants them.
I have a
Like
few next
I
gen
will take
comics.
them.
Yeah, the DC
So
ones. That they're good. They're really good.
no,
Three
like
dollars is not bad.
I enjoy them. Like they're fun and like these are in really good condition and they still have like all the ads, which is always really fun to like, go back and look at like what game was I supposed to be buying? What shoe? You know?
Have you been reading any of the modern Star Trek stuff?
I'm far behind. Like I think my last one where
I'm
I
also far
was
behind.
in was like the Dog of War stuff. So like I need to catch back
Oh,
up.
yeah,
Oh, and
yeah,
the
yeah.
Q War was of course because if Q is there, I will be
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So, all of
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
I'm also really far behind and I have to catch up. But I've been loving like all of the Star Trek stuff. And it's one of those things that I'm just like, man, Star Trek. I need to catch up on my shows. I need to catch up on my comics. But I'm more caught up on my comics than I am on my shows right now. So, Oh man.
So I
Brian
went
Brian
I know
being like you should have talked them down to a
I
dollar.
saw that shit talking down to $1.50.
I feel like $3 is pretty good. They're
They were
collectible
worth
and if they're in good
$3 to me.
condition. Did they
It
give you?
was
Do
fun.
you have like actual like runs as well? Like are they sequential?
I just picked up what was there because I'm never too
Okay.
fussy about that kind of thing. I'm like,
Yeah,
I'll find the others when
it's a
I find
bonus
them.
when it is, but yeah,
Yeah, like if it's like, if they're all in order, that's great. If not, that's fine too. So
I think I have like two from like one story that are together, and then I have one that's like a random one and one that's a random one for my next gen comics. I only have like four of them, but when I see them too, I'm like, ooh, next gen, ooh, I'll grab that
the only
because
one
they're all
I'd be
good.
aggressive about collecting in order would be Deep Space Nine, probably because I have a bunch of those. I'm like, I'm near to complete on Deep Space Nine. So I'm like, if I
Mhm.
see those, I'd be a bit more aggressive and be like, I'm gonna complete this run of I
The
guess it's like
collection.
15. So it's not even that intense. It's like ooh, 15. But so I went last with JSA. So what's something else that you have read?
Mm. Okay, what have I read? What have I read? Well, I mean, let's see. What do I want to pull off here? Well, I mean, we did talk about X-Men earlier. Have you been reading any From the Ashes stuff? Let's go over to the
I've been
Marvel
okay,
side for a
so
minute.
like I've fallen off a lot because there's been so much DC stuff. There's only so much time, but like
100%.
Uncanny is one I'm only one behind on. And so
Oh,
like because I saw that
okay.
you said that you had done Uncanny. So
Yeah, yeah, I have. I did. I have Uncanny. I was also thinking Exceptional. Someone was asking me, who was asking me about Exceptional X-Men? Was it you, Harlan? Were you I think you're in chat right now. About Exceptional X-Men. And I was thinking about saying that one to you, but then I was like, I just did a video on it. So I mean, I don't know if that's redundant. I don't know if people want to hear me talk about it like twice. I've also been reading Dazzler. I read Storm. I mean, I've been
mhm.
reading a bunch of stuff, but I'm not completely up to date on everything because also I've been reading a lot of DC and reading a lot of indie comics and
Mhm.
also doing a million other things. This is the problem. This is the
Harlan
problem.
says, "Yeah, it was me."
Yeah, it was you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I will just say, quick little aside. This is all I'm gonna say about Exceptional because I just did a full video on it. That's probably gonna be way longer than it ever needed to be. Going into the character analysis of like, Kate and her becoming Kitty again, and like how do I feel about that, and just this whole like where are we going with this, and
Mm-hmm.
where did we come from, and how do I feel about it. But the one thing I will say is that I feel like Exceptional is one of my favorite books right now for feeling like we're kind of moving forward the most. Even though it does feel like a return to a status quo, it's like a return to a status quo that comes from progression, if that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in order for you to move forward, it takes you back to like kind of where you were. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I am just loving how it's written, and also the facial expressions in that book, some of the kids that we meet in that book. I'm loving all the kids that we're meeting actually. And speaking of Uncanny X-Men, we have all these new
Mm-hmm.
characters. I love them. I hope
Yes,
that
this
they
one is high
stay
quality.
peak. I hope that they stick around, a lot of these new mutants we're introducing. It's always fun when we get new mutants, and then I'm like, which are the ones that will stay? And which
Yeah, that's
ones
always the question,
will
you
I
know. I
never
but I
hear from
do
again?
tend to enjoy them, and I just always feel sad because it means that A, we're not going to focus on some of the other ones that I really like, and like B, will they actually develop? Will we actually get to see them, become
Yeah,
or
as something new. I hope so. I think Uncanny X-Men has some of the strongest young mutants that I've seen, just in terms of the fact that they feel very distinct. These characters, and very like, even just also from a design perspective as well. I feel like Marquez's artwork in this. It's
it's
amazing.
really
It's
beautiful.
just it's really really
This
good.
book looks great.
It's great. And of course we have Wilson on colors, and like Wilson and I would say Belair are like my two favorite colorists right now in the industry. So
Mhm.
anything with them, I'm automatically like, ooh, do I need it? Do I need to read it? Do I need to own it? Because it's so pretty. But yeah, so with Uncanny X-Men #4, I actually did feel like we were returning a little bit to things that felt a little too, I don't want to say cliche, because cliche makes it feel like it's like tropey, and I don't feel like it's tropey at any point. But
Mhm.
it felt like we were kind of going into these similar patterns of, oh, there's this new scary threat. I mean, Sarah Gaunt, who is, established as being in Charles's past. Although I think there's something weird going on with that. I feel like in this issue,
Mhm.
there is an interaction at the beginning in issue #4 that felt so awkward. And I couldn't figure out if it was just like awkward because the writing was awkward there for
Was
some
it the
reason.
pregnant part?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was awkward, right?
It
That was
was. No, it
weird.
really
And it
was.
felt like not real. Like I was like, and then it was this thing of me being like, wait, is this just the writing being weird? But then I thought, I don't think Gail Simone would write like this unless there was like a reason for it.
Mhm.
So I think there's more to it, but we don't get any more than that weird moment at the beginning where you're like, wait, what just happened? And then it's like, anyways, back into the main story. And you're like, wait, what? What?
No, it was very like a record scratch moment where it was just like, "But I'm not pregnant." I'm like, "Why would anybody say
No one would
that?"
say that. No one would say that. And then also the thing that Charles says where he's like, and then I realized like who I was. And I was like, what does that mean? And then it's just like, anyways, right into the main story. That's all you get.
Like, "Oh no." Anyways.
Yeah, so I'm like left there scratching my head like, was that what just happened? Was there like some sort of like breakdown in the matrix for a second with me reading this comic? Or is this some sort of sign that Sarah Gaunt isn't what she seems to be? Which is also kind of implied later in the story when they talk about this idea of her maybe being a mutant. Um, but I also feel like uh the thing that I felt was a little typical was this
Mhm.
idea of the X-Men just like, oh, there's this great threat and they're like in danger and it's like unstoppable. It's like, but then it got to a point where it just got like silly, but like this is the 90s thing that I felt like was fun. And that's
Mhm.
something that I think this series is doing really well, just creating this sense of a classic vibe, but it's not fake, it's not phoned in, it's not just there for the point of nostalgia. It's just like living in that world.
Mhm.
And that's when, Saragant says something like, you know, you're Omega and I'm like 3 times whatever Omega is. And Rogue's like, Omega's like not a number. Like, it's a letter, first of all. And then she also gets hit and she's like, oh no, like I can feel that I'm concussed. And you're like, oh, okay, it's like it's getting serious. And then she's like, oh, my concussion just got like tripled. And I was like, that's not a thing that happens. That only happens in a comic. And I was like, this is the most 90s fight, and I love it, even though it's ridiculous. And then we got our like kind of last stand moment. So I was a little like, but then it keeps bringing me back around anytime I'm not sure. It's just something else will happen next that I'm like, oh, this
Just
is
when
great.
you thought you were out, they pull you back in.
Just when I thought I was out, Gail's like,
thank you
just
very
kidding.
much. Isaac says, I really am enjoying Ransom and Death Dream in Uncanny X-Men.
Yes, yes. I really love Death Dream. Death Dream. I really love Jitter as well. But like honestly, all these kids are just really good. I hope they all make it. I know it's not possible. We can't keep all the new Young Mutants. Some of them will fade into the ether. But there's also been some cool stuff happening in NYX too, honestly. I don't know if I'm fully caught up on NYX, but I might be like an issue behind right now. But there's also some cool new folks in that. And there's a character who can like basically control like power grids and like kind of is connected to cities. And I thought there's just cool power sets. Like in Exceptional X-Men, Alex is a mutant who his power set seems to be based in the psionic realm, and people just like blurt emotional baggage when they're around him. So they'll just be thinking of something and they'll be like, "Blah," and he'll be like, "This is my powers. I don't know." And he's also got a physical mutation. He's got a physical mutation, and that happens. And I was like, I can't wait to see how we use that, because that is weird.
He's gonna need to team up with the Sorrow Lantern. They can just mess people up together.
Imagine what they could do together, yeah.
One of the other things that I read this week that we were talking about briefly was Batgirl. Batgirl was another thing that has relaunched.
Please tell me about Batgirl, because I've only heard such good things about this. And also, Batgirl is the book that is following Batgirls is done, right?
Yes.
And then this is what has coming next. Okay.
But it's very
Did
much
you read
a kind
Batgirls?
of like I did read Batgirls actually, because there was a Spellbinder appearance on Batgirls. And also some of the artists I really enjoyed on Batgirls. So I was there for that.
Yeah. I only read a little bit of it, but I liked it. I thought it was interesting.
It's like, this is very much a kind of like, you can just jump in to this. This very much has that vibe. This is Tate Bromble, and then we have Takeshi Miyazawa on the art for it. I posted some of the art from it in my community tab, actually, some of the inside panels of it. What was really interesting was the realization that some people had never seen Cassandra's old costume or Cassandra, because I got a lot of like, is this Black Panther? You know, kind of stuff. And like, or is this Shuri? Or like, why would they do this to her? And I was like, oh no, this is Cassandra's outfit that she's had forever, but you know, with some mild tweaks. But I really like how it looks. And in terms of the story, this is very much another one that's kind of an intro, but it has less to intro than, say, like a JSA type thing. It's setting up the premise that Cassandra and her mom, Lady Shiva, are going to have to work together, like reluctantly, because there's this new group of assassins who are coming to take out Shiva and like people like associated with her. And that means Cassandra. And so they're kind of playing with the idea of, you know, how much does her mom actually care for her? Does she? Like, what is her relationship to her mom, which is quite complex, obviously. And they did a lot of really fun paneling in terms of like how she was reading her body language and what it meant, and, you know, that kind of stuff. And I thought that I didn't think Cassandra spoke too much, because Cassandra does speak now, but still not over much. And I really liked the way that Bromble made her dialogue feel kind of blunt and almost awkward, which I felt was very fitting for someone who came to speech so much later. Then there was only one moment in it where Lady Shiva, where like Batgirl like vanishes for a moment, and she's like, oh, she got that from her father. And I knew that she was referencing Bruce, but this seemed like an odd way for her to reference it, because like David Kane, I feel like would be more
Is
of the
her
reference
father?
would be the reference point
So it's like,
for that.
wait, what?
It's like, it's interesting. I hope they don't soften Shiva too much, because one of the things I've always found really interesting about Shiva is just how much she completely like ditched, Cassandra was like, nope.
I thought that would be really interesting actually when I heard, because I did hear it was like kind of a team up book with like Shiva, at least to start. I'm sure Shiva will be there in the beginning, and then I'm sure Cassie will go and do her own stuff later. But I thought that was really cool, because I was just like, yo, that's gonna be weird, because
it's interesting, because right now what they're playing with is the idea of like, does she love her, or does she is she just impressed by her, proud of the fact that like she's
this
come
is
out
her
this
daughter,
kind of,
like she's like,
that she's
I
kind of
made
like
that.
impressive, but not in any kind of like maternal kind of way. So it's just like, it'll be interesting to see how they play with that and where that goes. I'm like, I think you could do some really fun things with it. In terms of like a starter issue, it's fairly, standard, but I thought it was good. Like, standard doesn't have to mean bad. It's like sometimes doing simple and just executing it well can be really good. And I'm like, people remember the first Cassandra run quite fondly, so it'll be interesting to see how this stacks up. And I really like that Cassandra is getting another go at it, because I think Cassandra is really interesting. So
I think she's really interesting too, and I feel like she doesn't get like as much love as she deserves. She doesn't get as much, well, she gets a lot of love, but not a lot of spotlight. And so I think that's really cool that she gets to have her own book, and I think it's going to be interesting to examine that relationship. I
just think like it's fun to see who people are picking, because like Denise Camp was talking about how, like on the phone call with Scott Snyder, like he was asked like, who do you want to, like just who do you want to work on? And so I think it's just so interesting to see who people are picking, just like, yeah, this is the character that I've always wanted to work on. I'm like, I think that's so cool, Matthew Foster has a fun question for everybody. And thank you so much for being a member for 49 months, which is, fun question. What comic do you hate that everyone else loves, and vice versa? It's hard for me to think of comics I hate on the spot. Like, I find that a bit difficult, like just to pull them out. I tend to think more about comics that I like that people don't like, like more easily. What about you?
Hate that everyone else loves. Hate.
What do I hate? Such a strong word.
Yeah, I don't know. What do I hate? What do I hate?
Because usually it's just I'm not as fond of something. What do you hate?
Hate. I mean, hate is a strong word. Hate is a strong word. Can we just say, I don't know if I would say I hate it. Please don't put it out there that I hate it. But something that I thought I was going to like more, that I know a lot of people love, is I think it's a Tim Sal comic, and it's Spider-Man. Gwen Stacy.
Oh, Blue?
Spider-Man Blue. Yeah, thank you. Now I don't hate it, but I've heard so many good things about that comic, and I read it, and I like the art. I like the art. Who wrote that? Was it also did Tim Sal do the art?
Was it Jeff Loeb? Wasn't it Jeff Loeb who did that?
Is it Jeff Loeb? There you go. That's probably why I didn't like it very much. But I love the art. I think the art's gorgeous. But the writing, I was like, this is
I'll be your girl in a chair. Yeah, it's Jeff Loeb.
It's Jeff Loeb. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense, actually. But a lot of people love that book. So I mean, what do you love that other people hate? What do you love that other people hate? I almost forgot the second part of it.
Okay. Well, that's an easy one for me, because I've talked about it before, and I will preface it with the same thing that I always say beforehand. Everything that everybody says that's wrong with it is true. And that is Identity Crisis.
Identity Crisis.
And I thought of one that I dislike. No, hate, again, hate's too strong of a word. And this is one that I think I've talked about too, where it was because like it was sold to me as like something that I would love, and that this was something that I was really going to enjoy. And then like I did not enjoy it as much as many other people. And that is The Return of Bruce Wayne. That is something. And I have it. I still have it on my shelf back there. And it just didn't.
I mean, you don't hate it enough to take that book and be like, get off this shelf.
I don't think I hate anything enough to do that,
I know.
really.
Yeah, I don't think I've read anything that I'm like, this is so. I mean, if I know, here's the thing. I think also when you're in comics, as much maybe as you and I are, I know broad strokes of some things that I'm like, yeah, I'm
Mhm.
probably not going to read that one because that just doesn't sound like I'm going to like that. Whereas I could read this other book that I think I might like or that I know I'm going to love. So that's also a factor is like if there's something that I really feel like I won't like, that I'm like, well, I'm not going to prioritize reading it
Mhm.
because what's the point of that? I guess unless someone really wanted me to read. Oh, you know what? I didn't finish it though, so I don't know if
What
this
didn't you
actually
finish?
no, but no one liked it. I don't think people liked it.
What one?
Uh, Heir to Apocalypse,
Oh,
Heir
okay.
to. I think it's Heir to Apocalypse. It's one of the ones I was like, I feel like that should be the other one. Heir is it Heir of or Heir to? I really didn't like, but I haven't finished it. I have to read the final issue. I own it, so
Mhm.
I'll read it at some point. And then I can give you guys my full opinion. Yeah, Spider-Man Blue is just okay, says Brian. Yeah, okay, all right. Maybe you know what? And maybe I think everyone loves it, but maybe just some people love it. That's the other thing. It's hard to know. I don't know if there's something
It
that
can be hard to gauge sometimes. Like, sometimes it's really obvious, but also sometimes you assume that you have a take that's, like, hot or at least warm, and you put it out there, and it's
yeah.
like, "Oh, this is a cold take." You know? It's just like, nobody cares.
I don't know if there's something that I love that I feel like everyone hates. Like I'm trying to think of like what are the things that I've enjoyed before that I'm like, uh-oh. If I talk about this, people are gonna be like, "Oh, you really like that?" I mean, I guess I don't think this is that hot of a take, but I really liked the beginning of Zeb Wells' Spider-Man run, which was
Mhm,
also admittedly like more collab. Like there were other people that worked on it. So full
mhm.
disclosure, I was talking about this the other day, and I'm using streamer in my chat reminded me that there were a lot of other people that worked on it, and I was like, that's true. But I liked the Beyond Corporation stuff. I thought that was really cool and really fun. Didn't really love the ending of it, but everything else I really enjoyed.
Mhm.
And I think now because of where we are with ASM, just a lot of people have like a bad taste in their mouth. So like anytime I bring up anything that's like Zeb Wells related ASM, anything I actually right now I feel like anytime I bring up anything Zeb Wells to a degree, and I'm like, oh guys, like I'm like, well, wait a minute, I actually really like Zeb Wells. Zeb, if you're out there and you're watching this, you're great, and don't let the people get you down. It's okay. There's going to be life after ASM, and I can't wait to read what you do next, honestly.
You've activated the Paul people in the chat. Tourette's 504, thank you very much, saying, "I hate new X-Men and love Hush." I like Hush a lot too. I do. I'm very okay, this is something that is baffling me about the new Hush marketing. And so you're here so I could like figure out if you also think it's a bit odd. The fact that they keep calling it Hush 2 when Hush has already had a couple of sequels
Yeah, it's
is
weird.
just,
Like, what does that mean? Hush
I just so
2.
I just like, are we discounting Heart of Hush and Return of Hush and like the other things that
We
happened
should have just
with
called it like
Hush?
Hush Be Quiet or something, or like Hush
Shush, like
Again.
some people were
Shush.
just, except we already have a shush now, so we can't call it
Yeah,
shush.
we can't do that. But there's something else there that you could have done with it that could have been, I think, more fun. And then we don't have to actually be like, 2. And then everyone's like, but wait, let me count. Not
See,
really 2.
whenever I do that, people like put up like Hush to the Hush thing. like, like,
Oh
Hush,
my goodness, I like it. Hush, shut it.
yeah, Hush, shut it.
Shut it. Shut up.
So many
Hush,
people
be
are
quiet.
suggesting the Hush
Hush
thing.
again. Hush 2, silence will fall.
Silence
Oh
of
my
the
gosh.
Hush, but no. Oh.
Oh, Brian said just read his last Spider-Man issue and it was just regular Spidey stuff. It just wasn't, yeah. I mean, and here's the thing. I haven't read all of Zeb Wells' Spider-Man run, so I can't really. People often ask me about things that I haven't read
Mhm.
that they're like, they're like, I don't like this. And they'll be like, what do you think, Amanda? And I'm like, I haven't read it, so I don't know. Like, I know about it, so like I have thoughts, but to have like a fully formed opinion, I think I would need to actually sit down and read it all and then say, well, here's how this was for me. So
Mhm.
until I do that, it's like all I can give you is a broad stroke opinion, which is, yeah, Paul none of us like Paul. I don't think we're supposed to like Paul, honestly, though. I think that's the point. But Beyond was before Paul, so this Paul didn't exist at
The
that time.
pre-Paul era.
It
Pre-Paul
was a better
era.
time. Yeah, it was the time
BP before Paul.
In Spider-Man, there is before Paul and there is after Paul. But also, I will say the fact that Paul has become such a
like a touchstone.
I think is something that you could take with you to be like, I created that. I made Paul, which is it's a double-edged sword in a way.
You can tell fans later, like, you weren't there for Paul. Like, I was around since Paul.
I remember Paul. Yeah, like years from now, we'll all be sitting in rocking chairs, being like, "Do you remember Paul?" These kids don't know about Paul today. Oh my goodness.
Oh gosh.
These kids don't remember Hush too.
Let's give it a few decades before we get to that point.
They'll be doing Hush 2 again, I imagine. They'll just be like, we'll just call it Hush 2 again. And we'll be like, this is like Hush 25.
I'm genuinely curious to see like what they want to do with like Tommy Elliott at this point. I'm like,
what is there left to do is
see.
The question. What do we have left? What is there left to say about it? I think that's a question, though, that you could ask about many things in comics, because ultimately everything comes back around again. It's all very cyclical. So, but if you can bring something fresh or do something cool, because I do think he's a cool character. So, and I like Hush. So
it's like I have a very special, like I have a soft spot in my heart for Hush, because it's what launched me like down the path to eventually being here to talk about comics at all. So I'm like, I will always have like a very warm
Hush your
spot.
First thing? I never knew that.
No, it's not my first thing. It's the first thing that I bought with my own like money, and it's the first like official thing that like really got me into it. So it's like, yeah, like Hush is I think my gateway comic. So I definitely have a very strong like affinity for it, even though I acknowledge like, yeah, there are moments where it clearly pivoted, or like, sometimes when it's really going for like style over substance at certain moments. But I do think it's a genuinely like fun, entertaining story. So
yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that really got me in was like, I think it might have been Kelly Sue DeConnick's Captain Marvel was like the first thing that I really like sat down and was like, I'm gonna read this. And that also has some flaws to it, but there's also a lot of good stuff in there. And I think because of that, I will also forever be a Carol Danvers fan. So for better and for worse. And then, and then I went and I read some of Civil War II, and I said, what happened?
Lots of things happened in Civil War II.
Yeah, lots of things happened in Civil War II. Things we don't talk about anymore. We've forgotten all of those things. That's all that
So you and I also read a bunch of, we've talked about a little bit, not really stuff. Actually. We've yes, we did do yes. Are we diving into that first, or are we gonna go into the
I mean, we also need to talk about let's pick one and talk about that. And then we should talk about another absolute. We should talk about Absolute Superman, I think.
Yes, that's true, because we talked about them in general and like together, and like we talked a bit about because we talked about Wonder Woman, I feel like a bit. So like we should probably give Soup some time. But like, what indie one should we do? Did you get the chance to read Devour?
I did. I read it today. I read it this morning. I was like, I'm gonna read it. It's gonna happen. I haven't read Hyde Street issue number 1 though, but I did read Devour.
I also read Devour. So.
What'd you think?
I liked Devour. I did enjoy Devour. I read Hyde Street number 1. I did a video on it, and from that video I said that it felt like it was going to have like very strong Twilight Zone vibes, and this definitely does. Like very much, this feels like you were like reading through some kind of anthology sci-fi kind of episode. And there are a couple of things. It's like I enjoyed overall the kind of like generational aspect that it brought to the horror that it was working through, even though lots of what happened in the plot was typical and I knew where it was going ultimately. Just some of the ways it handled the subject matter felt very genuine, and I really enjoyed that. What about you?
I loved how I loved how it played with this idea of to be thin is to like starve yourself, and this whole idea of because you have this thing inside you, you actually have to like eat more. Like there's something horrific
Mm-hmm.
about the idea of like I don't know, somehow being like a gluttony to being wanting to be thin.
Mm-hmm.
They brought this element to it that I had never thematically thought of this before, but this almost idea of how wanting that is also like this excess. So there's this like
It's
these themes of gross excess, but in relation not to being
mm-hmm.
like obese or anything like that. It's more like in relation to the opposite. Um
Mm-hmm.
and I've never seen anyone
It like
do that with this type of story.
it treated it a lot like its own type of hunger, its own type of desire, which I found
Appetite.
interesting. Like there are echoes of thinner in there, but because it's a bit different because ultimately it's something that they do to themselves. And the thing that was the most frightening about it to me was not only how Miss Goodbody, who's one of the people, so the way Hyde Street works from like Hyde Street number one is that there are a bunch of these entities who live on Hyde Street, and they're all competing for souls and seeing who they can
Mr.
get. Yep.
X-Ray
Mixer
on the
X-rays, they're
street.
prankies on that page too.
Yeah.
And like they're trying to get people. And so you're getting these little side adventures clearly of how some of the others are doing it. And it's like her method has this level of reach that reaches down through generations. And it's like there is just something about that that was just kind of really creepy and sad, you know?
Yeah, it was that actually was really I don't know. It felt kind of like I really felt that because I do feel that there are these pressures that you deal with even as like a young girl. And I'm sure like and I don't even think this is really, although the characters that they're focusing on in the story are obviously female and are women and all of that stuff. I don't think this is
I don't think it's a
exclusively
unique experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
unique experience. But these pressures that you feel when you're young, I'll just say, even where people say to you, things that they think are offhand, that you, when you're younger, it like
Yeah.
sticks in your mind and it stays with you. And then as
Forever.
you, forever, and as
Mhm.
you get older, not only does it reflect back in the mirror at you every time you look in the mirror and you think about it, um, especially I mean obviously there are those things, and then as time goes on hopefully you find ways to unravel that and explore that and therapy and
Mhm.
all these beautiful things. But not only does that still stay, like even with all the therapy that I've been through, I know that I have things that I just have to deal with that voice in my head and be like, there it is, and we're just gonna move on now. But it was the idea that you pass that on to someone else that's vulnerable and create this generational, like we are the people that are creating it for each other, and that inheritance almost of these body issues. And that to me was like the biggest
And
scare of
the
the book.
ending of it was the ending was
Awful.
horrific to me. Like, I was just like yeah, like, cause I knew where the first ending was going. I was like, "Okay, so
Yeah.
like, here we are," but, like, the second ending, like, when it pushed it to that level, I was like, "Oh, like, that's a lot of a lot." Like, that's
The
really dark,
idea that in
so
order to fix the problem is for us to just do it earlier, to just
yeah.
basically
It was
give
just
someone
so,
this
like
inheritance earlier on is like so messed up. But also is
s
so
mhm,
weirdly like you can understand the perspective of the character, which makes it more horrifying. This idea that she's like, "Oh, I'm going to
mhm,
spare you going through all the stuff I went through as a kid and as like a young
yeah,
woman by just doing this now." As a that
yeah.
like uh also, how do you even have kids when you have this thing?
Yeah, I know, I was looking at
How
that, I
does
was
that
like, "I don't
work?
know, like, we're gonna have to, like" you know?
When we got to the delivery scene, I was just like, "What?" But then I was like, "Oh yeah, she's a daughter and her mom's a daughter." I was like, "Yeah, I guess I just thought because her mom like had like she was born before her grandmother had the Devour."
Yeah.
But then I thought, oh, but that doesn't mean that her mom wasn't already on Devour before she had her. So I mean, I guess that's just a thing you can do. What do you think happened with the aunt in this? Because I'm still kind of confused about that.
I think that the Antoinette was fighting it. That's the vibe that I got. That, like, because what was the thing about, like, the main one was that they had embraced it. And they were like, "This is,
Mm.
this is good." And I feel like because one of the things about Hyde Street that I find is really horrifying is that they've been playing with this since the promo thing, is that not all the people that things happen to might necessarily be the worst. As like some of them might have things be happening to them because of other people, in their lives. It's like that's kind of like a freaky concept. And I like how this one opened up the door to exploring more of those other characters. Cause I'm like, I can actually see this universe being quite expansive and fun in that kind of way. Because there are so many like interesting characters that they've hinted at, like Dr. Ego is one who I would love to see um stories about who they've kind of hinted at already. Like those two. There we go. See, whenever we talk about anything scary, it's like it doesn't want to do it.
It knows. It's like, whoa,
It's
watch out. This is
like
scary.
it's too much. You're frightening the people.
I'm scared. The internet gets scared. It's like, oh, I'm freezing up.
But Dante Cook, yeah, I know. Dante Cook says, "Hi, ladies. Did either of you pick up the trade release of Paul Dini's Zatanna? You never talked about it, but I'm curious. I've done a whole retrospective on Dini's Zatanna. Actually, that's a fun series.
No,
I really like that
but
series.
I probably would like
Have you read that?
because I like Paul Dini and I like Zatanna, so I haven't read it. No. Should I read it? Do you think I'd like it? I like Zatanna. I think she's great.
I think
like Paul
so.
Dini.
I think that
Yeah.
I think you'd enjoy it.
I also want to
It's
read
a like you can tell like I
the
mean
Black Label as well.
Paul Dini
which is
like loves Zatanna, which is no secret.
Oh, okay. But like, what kind of love we talking about?
Yeah, that one's good. That one's good too.
Yeah, Bring Down the House. Is that what it's called?
Both, as a character.
As a character, as a woman.
Yes.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, but I love when people get to, work on characters that they love. I think that's always great. In
there we go.
Most cases.
Mm-hmm.
People in my chat are talking about Secret Wars. Is there another Marvel Secret Wars? Or are you guys just talking about the movies? You guys are talking about the movies, right?
No, don't frighten me.
I know. I was like, what? I was like, no, there's not. Also, BCJ, I actually have a video on the DC All-In Special. I wouldn't be surprised. Sasha, did you do a video on the DC All-In Special? You read
it? I did as well, yeah. I did.
Yeah. We didn't forget. Don't worry. I'm not really, I mean, I guess I am a comic collector, but I like reject that term for some reason. I reject it as though it's like bad, but it's not bad. If you're a comic collector, you're great. Don't know why I do that. I just think of it like the people that come in that buy all the books that I want to read just so they can sell them. And then I'm like, but I wanted to read that. And they're like, it's sold out because a bunch of people came by to buy those. And I'm like, those people, are they even going to read those books?
I think that's why I don't consider myself a collector, even though I do collect them, which is because I think I associate collecting with not reading them.
Yeah, exactly. Even though that's probably, I mean, there's probably a lot of collectors that collect, and obviously, I mean, I know people that collect to collect and also collect to read and do both, and I'm sure they're not mutually exclusive. But sure. I really don't do that. Although I have bought a few things. I'm sure you have as well, Sasha, where it's like, but this cover is so great. I just want to buy it to have it. I have a bunch of the X-Men magazine covers.
Oh, okay.
And I have multiple versions of multiple things just because I was like, I just want this fancy cover version of it. However, my thing is that anytime I buy something, even if it is like an item that I bought to collect it, I still read it, even if it means I'm reading the same thing again. Because I refuse to buy something and not read it.
Dante Cook is continuing on. Thank you very much. I love the new run so much, but I prefer Paul's take on her.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, you're making me intrigued, Dante. Maybe I gotta check this out. Maybe I gotta check this out. How long is the run? Also, Black Phoenix. Thank you so much. Welcome
It's
on in.
not too long.
Not too
Like
long.
it got into double digits, but it's not like really deep in or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
I was able to cover all of it in one video, type of thing. But I thought
Yeah.
it was really fun, and it has some stories I remember always to this day, like Zatanna versus puppets. I think was a very fun moment of it because they brought in like she has like this puppophobia and they gave her like a whole like backstory as to why and like this the thing with
Oh,
her
that's so
father and stuff. It was
fun.
interesting.
That's fun. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like something I would like. Puppet phobia sounds great.
Fumo Tubala, thank you very much. And that's why I only buy trades. I mostly buy trades, but I do get like nowadays I tend to get a couple more, but again, it's the space thing. Everything is a
Yeah.
space thing, you know?
Everything is dude. Yeah, I know. Everything is a space thing. I don't even have space in this frame soon. I watch some YouTubers and they have like literally a mountain of stuff behind them, and I'm like,
Mhm.
soon that will be me. Like if I
You're
don't,
looking at your future.
I'm looking at their screen and being like, if I just filled like this area a little bit more, I could be that person. I could be that person in that video. That could be me. So yeah, that is a problem. I mean, with books in general, and also then if you move,
Oh
goodness, if you ever
gosh,
move,
yeah.
it's so heavy, all the paper.
Mhm.
Um,
They like those
also,
boxes, they like you don't think you're putting that much in there. And then you go
yeah,
and try and pick it up, and it's
yeah, and then
horrible.
you're like, why is it so heavy? And it's like, that was just like a couple books, but those books are dense. Also, Black Phoenix, thank you so much for becoming a member. Happy 6 months, Fang Gang. Thank you so much.
Yes. So, should we do the missionary? Are we Is it
Is it
missionary
time?
time?
Is it time for us to talk about? You want to do missionary, and then we can talk about Superman. We're gonna go in a very different direction after this, which I kind of like. Yeah, what do we have? I don't even know. I think we talked about all my stuff though. So I think this is it.
I have one more after that's an indie. Oh, actually, I have two more. I forgot about Profane. How did I forget
Oh
about
yeah,
Profane?
profane.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
well, we can talk about missionary though. Why don't we do missionary? We'll do Superman. Tell me about some indie things. I mean, I
Yes.
got more things I can pull too. I have just like a stack beside me that this is my in case you guys are wondering what I'm even pulling from. This is my stack of things to do videos on.
Mhm.
So anyways, one day.
Like, I don't know,
It's
like,
hard.
just because you have your distillery book, I have my distillery book, I was like, I felt like I needed
Yeah.
to,
Oh, I
like,
just
bring
got Big Burn. I haven't read that one yet, but I just got it. I
Mhm.
keep it's really bad, Sasha. I'm like rating like when I'm at my shop now, I'm like, where are the distilleries? Is there anything new? Is there anything I don't own
Because you
yet?
gotta find them because they don't actually put them in, like, a specific section, at least not at mine, so you just kinda have to go and,
No.
like, which one is differently sized, and then, you know?
They have like an area that's like down. It's kind of like where all the like collectors like covers and stuff are, like all the higher price point stuff. And then like the lower stuff though is just things that aren't on the main rack. So
Mhm.
they have an area that's kind of down below, and I just kind of go down there and I'm like, what is that? But I think I picked up I think I also find it hard to read the issue numbers, so I'll sometimes just grab a random number. Not that I care anyways. I'm like, I'll buy
Mhm.
any number. It could be number 1, it could be number 203. We're not at that stage yet with Distillery, but even if we were, I'd be like, sure, 203 is fine. I'll read it. So the missionary. How do we start this?
Well, I will say this, I
um
don't think it needed to start that way. I'm gonna put that out there, and that's not because I'm prudish or anything like that. I just feel like it was going for that opening more for the shock
it
value
was, I
than
think, yeah.
necessarily for anything else thematically. Because like overall, I found this kind of interesting, but it wasn't my favorite distillery book that I've read. I think will be the way that I will phrase it in terms of like what was going on because I did feel that at times it was really prioritizing having these big bombastic like shock moments over like building up the kind of like lore of this kind of war that was going on in the background, which I was like, this seems kind of important, you know?
I mean, I kind of like that it just jumps in, though. I do like that it's not like a bunch of like exposition to start.
Mhm.
I do think it started that way, that it started with a certain
With activities.
activities, adult activities. I think it started that way to definitely shock us.
Mhm.
But the thing that I liked about it is that because it did that, it really brought me into the comic. So it made it like, I was like, what is happening? And like, what? Whoa. Like,
Mhm.
this comic is just straight out the gate going for some crazy stuff. I do wish that there were some things that were a little bit more explained, but then I'm like on the fence because I like I said I like that it's not holding my hand at all. It's just kind of letting things unfold and then we're figuring it out kind of as we go. I really like the
Mhm.
relationship between the main character and the demon.
Mhm.
But also the fact that nobody feels precious in this comic at all.
In what sense? Just that you feel that, like, anything could happen to them at, like, any time or,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, like I feel like anything could happen to anyone, good, bad, other things. Anything could happen to anyone at any time. And I liked that element of it. It felt uh, a little bit chaotic, a little bit unpredictable, but I feel like overall it kind of fits the tone of the story. It being chaotic and unpredictable based on this idea of this demonic angelic war that is kind of interceding on Earth, these supernatural almost worlds coming together. I thought all of that was cool. Also, the art is just like, I mean, it's Ryan Stegman. It's just phenomenal. It's like Ryan
It has to
Stegman
be.
if he was, I don't know, like they were just like do whatever. I don't
I feel
know.
like those were the moments where it really like shone and kind of like the
Yeah,
action,
the action.
moments. And like I liked what they were trying to do with the main character in terms of like he opens up and he sees that his wife is having this affair and it's just like it just blows his mind because he just can't really conceive what's going on. He's just lost his job and then he finds himself like bonded as an agent in this war. And it's like I liked the premise and like some of the execution of it, but on the whole, like for me, I think it's going to need a bit more in the lore department to really hook me beyond this is a book that has like some really cool like action sequences in it. But it's definitely something where I'd read the second issue. I'm like, I would be back for like, issue 2.
I would want to see a little bit more depth in some of these characters as well. Like, I feel like there's some cool stuff happening, but it could be a little bit more nuanced. I think a lot of the stuff that I really liked about a lot of the characters ultimately came as well from a lot of the designs.
Mm.
So once again, like there's a lot of stuff there that's very visually gratifying, but I want to see that like translate to like who all the characters are. I like though that there's big things that happen in it. It's just like it's a big burly kind of book.
It was like a lot longer than I expected because like Stegman's writing and then we have Howard on art and it's just
Oh
like
yeah, sorry, Howard on art, sorry.
it went for like it did keep going and I did appreciate that about it. I was like, okay, so I am getting a decent amount in here, which is something I appreciate because the Distillery books are a bit more steep, but they are bigger and they do have the like, the harder kind of cover, which I do appreciate about them as well. Like they're a bit, more magazine style almost
Yeah.
in a way that they
Yeah,
feel.
the stock is really nice.
Mhm.
It's very glossy. You guys can see with the
Mhm.
lights.
It's just Distillery in some corners, I don't know if you've heard this, has a bit of a reputation for some people as being a company that likes to throw smut in for like smut's sake. But I don't know. I wouldn't agree with that necessarily. It's just that some of their books lean in that direction. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It all depends on how you implement it.
I
So,
mean, I would say I can see why people say that
mhm.
based on what I've read and the things that I've wanted to read and been like, this is kind of smut. But it's
Mhm.
like a lot of this, there's a lot of stuff that's smut that's art smut. And
You like
that's,
Somna? So,
yeah, yeah. So I mean, you can like you said, it really does depend, I think, on the story and
What you
what you
do
want to
with it.
do with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, this I do feel like it's gratuitous. It's there for the sake of kind of like shocking us, but also kind of like I think immediately like just pulling us into the world, which
I
I
think
I
I think
think is
it's
effective.
trying I think it's trying to be shocking because there is so much religious imagery in that. And so it's like
Mm.
it's trying to like, ooh, we're juxtaposing, but I don't know. I'm like, that's something that happens a lot when people are playing with that type of, like religious imagery. So to me, I'm like, that wasn't the vulgarity and that juxtaposition. I'm like, that's not what's, gonna get me to be like, oh my goodness. Like for me, it would be more like if something really unique was happening and how they're gonna depict like the two realms or like lots of maybe some of the Christian symbolism or stuff like that. So I'm like, that's what I'm curious to see if they do more with.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that too, because I never really thought of it that way because I just didn't even like the juxtaposition was just kind of, I don't know if it's just that it flew over my head, but it just didn't feel meaningful
Mm,
enough.
hmm
I maybe is like what you're saying. Basically, I didn't even observe that, but then you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I guess that also makes sense. That could be a reason, but it wasn't impactful in that way. And
hmm
so I think what maybe it's trying to say is just like both sides of these of the fight are like it's not like really there's a good or bad side, even though it's like, heaven versus hell type of
hmm
fight. Um but I think I don't really think you need that at the beginning of the book anyways, because I think you get that through the sense of just there's these two sides and they're just kind of two sides. It
And
doesn't
just
really
the way
paint
you see
either
them
one as
fight each
being
other.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they both have their own approaches, but you don't really see of like these are clearly the heroes. It's like
hmm
it just seems like everyone else is kind of caught in the middle and there's a lot of people that don't even want to be involved, but they're like I guess like I'm a demon, so like I guess I
Yeah,
gotta
it's like this is what's happening now.
gotta do this thing. I don't even want to do anything. I just this is my life. Um yeah, I'm definitely intrigued to see where it goes, though. Howard's art's really great, and I feel like there is just this loudness to this book that is appealing to me.
Mm,
I I hope that it has more to offer, I guess, as it
hmm
unfolds. But it's only in issue 1, so you never know.
It's true.
M-
There's still plenty to go.
Mature, it says.
Yes.
Mature is right. I didn't even know when I picked this up that
Were
was
you
going to
just
be
like
a thing.
hunting for Distillery?
I was just like saw it and it was actually on the main rack, missionary,
hmm
and I thought, oh, like I kind of want to check out some Distillery because we had been talking about it and I'd been
Yes.
looking at it and obviously Somna and all that stuff, and then I was just like, oh, like maybe I'll like grab this and like check it out, and then Duck and I were reading it and we just kind of opened it and we were like, oh, okay then. I guess that's how the book is starting. But yeah, if you all read it, you will see what we're talking about
hmm
within the
And you
first
will
few
know.
pages. You will know
YouTube
the
will not
missionary.
demonetize us like they did for our Hal Jordan hard traveling heroes.
Couldn't
Never
handle it.
forget.
Never forget.
Oh. So, do you want to touch on Superman since we touched on Wonder Woman?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. So,
Um.
Superman, because like you were texting me and you were like, my chat's telling me this is the worst one. And I don't feel like it's the worst one.
Yeah. I understand why people can feel that way, but I could also understand why people feel the exact opposite to that way. To be honest
hmm
with you, because it's definitely not the worst one. It's it's interesting. It's
To,
for me it was the least emotional one. That's what I would say.
I would
That's what
agree
I
with
said
that
for me.
because Cal's very disconnected in the way that he describes things. It's almost kind of remote. It's really playing into that observer kind of element, even when he's talking about the things that happened to his parents and like his family and all of those kind of things. But I found it to be the most deliberate. Like, there were lots of things that I was noticing where I was like, "Oh, so they've gone back to, like, the Silver Age kind of uniforms, and they're using the crests," and, like, "Oh, so, like, once more he's fighting more, like, for workers," and those kind of things. There were lots of callbacks in the way that they did things where I was like, "Oh, okay, so clearly there is a deep knowledge and love of Superman's lore present here, and it's kind of
Yeah.
being remixed." This
Yeah.
one felt very remixy. It's like, okay, like, Superman, now here's the remix, kind of thing. But a lot of it was pulling from stuff that was already utilized because there were people who were like, "Oh, I'm
Yes.
feeling New 52. Oh, I'm feeling Earth 1." So it's like there were a lot, it was pulling from so many different things. And I was like, I thought that was interesting how it brought them and compiled them in that way. Although for me personally, I found the Krypton stuff more interesting than
Yeah, me too.
your stuff.
Me too. But I think we're gonna get like kind of these two threads, and I think it's gonna be really interesting to see sort of where they intersect and where they divert. And I think the Krypton stuff is definitely more interesting to me as well. I think, although I am excited for, I mean, Superman versus Lois Lane. That sounds pretty
I mean,
fun.
that's the entire Silver Age. I mean, don't just in their romance. Oh.
But I feel like the main takeaway from this book too, though, that I thought was interesting, I don't even know if I talked about this in my video because I kind of thought about it more after the video, was that I realized when I read it and when I talked about it, I had this idea in my head of how everything goes, right? Because it is
Mhm.
playing on our knowledge of
Yes.
everything.
Mhm.
But at the same time, this is absolute DC. So there's stuff that's implied. Like, it's implied that Krypton no longer exists. We talk about it in the past tense. We talked about it
Mhm.
as this is how it was. But we
Mhm.
never say, like, and it's no longer exists or anything like that.
I
So it made
clocked
me
that too, that it didn't explode in this issue. I'm like,
not in
it
this
didn't
issue.
we didn't see it explode, not yet at least, so we'll see.
It is said that Superman is the last surviving vestige, I think, of the House of El. I think that's the wording they use specifically that Soul uses. But we didn't say the last Kryptonian. So I was also like, this is interesting, the choice, because it makes me wonder if, like, we are all assuming that Krypton is going to go boom because of what happens in the story and also because of past origins.
Mhm.
But what if it doesn't go boom? And then I was like, oh, this could be more interesting even than I thought. And every time
It
I
would be
think about these
clever,
little
yeah.
details, yeah.
It'd be
What do
clever
you
to subvert it.
Yeah. It would be kind of cool if they were just like, oh, but it didn't die, but like it isn't the way it was in some way. Like I could see how maybe it's changed or but I mean, why does Superman come to Earth? Then I have a lot of questions, but you could answer those questions in the comic. How do you feel about some of the changes that are made to Krypton?
Well, the thing is, all of those things have already been in play before. So that was one of the things where I was like, nothing that's happening here hasn't happened already. The
Mm.
only thing that's different is the L subject positioning inside of it. But like everything
Yeah.
else, like the class system, all of those things have been played with before. And even some of the things they talk about in terms of like Laura wanting to be an astronaut, those kind of things, like she was an astronaut in like the 70s miniseries, like all that kind of stuff. So it's like
Yeah. It's
all of that,
playing
it
on
was
all these
just
previous things.
it was playing on all stuff that was already there. So in that sense, to me, Krypton didn't feel very different because they played with the idea of Krypton, being this kind of rigid place before. What was interesting to me was that you had more details about some of the
Mm.
stuff that they were doing in terms of the environment and how it was being mined and those kind of things and like the structure and that kind of stuff. Like that to me was interesting, even though like even if you go way back, they talk about things like the ruling council and having to get approval and like those kind of things. So it's like it's all there. So that's what impressed me. I was like, it's pulling from all these things. All these things were there. It's
Yeah.
just now kind of like compiling them together, kind of,
Well,
in this
and I think
way.
kind of giving them more of a gravitas, like giving them more weight, giving them more meaning in the world, where it felt like we're actually going to be exploring a lot of like the whys behind like but why was this the way it is? I
Well,
mean, I
some
don't know
people
if
were
that's what we do,
saying,
but
like, I haven't watched Krypton the show. So some
oh,
people were like, I'm getting Krypton vibes. I'm like, I did not watch Krypton, so I
neither
can't
did I.
speak to how Krypton was. So I don't know if it's pulling from Krypton or not. But
Has
some
there
people were saying they
ever
were getting some
been
of that.
in Krypton, or has there ever been in the comics like this idea of almost like a science religion combo thing on Krypton? Because I thought that was new, but I'm also not as deep into the Superman lore as you are.
The science
So
class has always been important. The equivocation of them as like to that level of
yeah,
like, like a cleric, not so much. But again, I'm not sure if that's fully intentional or not. I'm kind of like waiting to see how that plays out to see if like are they at like a worship level with it? Like where are we going with that? Or is it more of like a title? So I'm very like intrigued into how that fits into like their system or not. But it's
I,
like those are the things I was the
yeah.
most interested in. And also seeing more because we've seen Cal older before. Again, in lots of the Silver Age flashbacks, he's not an infant. So it's like he's been older there before, but he's never been quite this old, I don't think. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts him as well.
And
So
we
I'm like,
also
I'm
don't know
curious about
how
those
old
things.
he'll end up being when he leaves, which I think is
Yes.
interesting because that's not been defined yet. I mean, it's implied that he's been on Earth for a while. So,
Yes.
but I also don't know how old he is. He looks young, but we'll see.
Because they give him that hair. He give him the young boy
They
hair.
give him
So
the young hair. I think the religious science aspect of it is really interesting to me. I
I
I
think so
do think
too.
it's not defined, but just the wardrobe choices are interesting. So we'll
Well,
see.
it's
And
funny because it's
also
like the
it's Jason Aaron, so we'll see.
like I'm really I hope that they dive more like into some of those things because I'm really like genuinely curious about them. And it's like it always makes me think of like my grid mark, like edgy like Superman story that lives in my head that no one should ever do, where I'm like, Jor-El was actually wrong and like Krypton didn't explode. And so he sent Clark there in shame and like actually Krypton's all alive. Like all the tapes Clark has is a lie. And I'm just like, oh God, he needs to write this Grant Morrison. We're gonna edify this. I'm
Oh,
like,
what do
don't
you
do
think
it.
is happening with
But
Brainiac in it? That's my other question. Like, because
I
Brainiac felt very much
personally,
the same, but then I was like, is he?
I
Or
think, I think Brainiac is Lex. I personally think
hmm,
it's like we're at Lexiac because that was like that's also a thing they like to play with a
yeah,
lot, and they play
a
with it like from
combo.
the Silver Age. They've done that. So
Mm-hmm.
since this was pulling so many things, like the little bottle cities and like all of those things, I'm like, it might pull some deep cuts and that's exciting to me and that's why that was the thing I really liked about it even if it again didn't have that big kind of kapow moment even him getting at the ending we won't spoil it but I'm like even that I was like okay but I did like the codas that they had the three codas at the end where you saw some of the snippets of like the rest of the world and again like this one for me felt the most like dire. Even though Wonder Woman was fighting all those giant monsters and stuff like that, just because the color palette of this one, just everything just felt like so, like muted and stuff on
Yeah.
Earth. It just felt like depressed, you know?
The other thing that I really liked about Absolute Superman is I felt it was the most wide in terms of its scope, in terms of the world building, because like
Mhm.
with Diana, like a lot of her stuff is, it's either like we're in hell and that stuff's going on, or we're in Gateway City and there's a monster fight. So it's like, okay,
Mhm.
that's not very big. And then, obviously with Batman, it's Gotham, so
Mhm.
that's that. But with Superman, it feels like I mean obviously cosmic, so that's big. And then like it
Mhm.
felt like a global thing. Like Superman is like not just he's not in one place. He's like trying to go everywhere all at once. And we're building up this idea of what the world is like. So
Mhm. You
that
also saw
is
more of the
cool.
corporations and stuff, Lazarus Command, Lazarus Corp, like the Peacemakers, all of those kind of things. And
Mhm.
it did make it feel like a bit bigger than
Yeah.
some of the other ones did. So like I liked it. Like I said, I've liked them all.
Yeah.
Like there's something to like in all of them, I think.
Yeah. I think I can
Oh,
understand why some
Dante, thank you very
people. Oh
much.
yeah.
Am I the only one a little tired? They're talking about the missionary, I can tell, of the whole heaven
Mm.
versus hell storytelling. And Dolfo's usage of the storytelling is the only version I'm not bored with. How are you two handling not getting fatigued? For
don't
me, I
read a
think I
lot
read
of
a
it.
lot of stuff.
Yeah. I was gonna say I don't read a lot of heaven versus hell storytelling in general. I do actively tend to avoid it, but the missionary, it just drew me in from the cover. I never even thought it would be like a heaven versus hell story, even though the cover does have, obviously a demonic looking man, and it's called the missionary. I did not clue into that at all, and then I read it and went, oh, I guess that's what that's about. So I think because I don't read a lot of that, it doesn't feel too daunting to me. But I try to tap out when I feel like, oh, that's a lot. But I guess there is a lot of it though
Like,
when you
I
think about
personally,
it.
I like comparing and contrasting. So, like, I'm always kind of like, ooh, how does this compare to this? How does this compare to that? Where does it rank over here? Like, all of that kind of stuff. So, in that
Yeah.
sense, to me, it's not boring. So, because I'm always kind of thinking about it in the context of maybe something else as well as it of itself. So, I think for me, that's how I keep it interesting. Rockstar, thank you very much. What do y'all think of the Peacemakers? Do you think Christopher Smith Peacemaker exists? If so, in what capacity? I mean,
I think he does.
the
I like
cynical
to
part of me
believe.
says yes for synergy. So, but I mean, I think you can do some interesting and fun things there. It's like I don't mind the fact that they're so clearly trying to tie some of the things that are going to matter in like the gun verse and stuff and bring some of those things in. I think, the character is getting more visible to people and stuff. So I think using it in that way. And I think I think it could be an interesting remix if they do bring, Christopher Smith in. Like I do like what they've done with the characters they've brought in so far in all of the different absolute books. I
I
have a
would very
question for
much
you
be down for
actually.
that. Oh, yeah.
Does the okay, so absolute. Does it feel very New 52 to you?
No.
And
No.
why not?
Because we're not trying to redefine something. We're just doing a different
Mm,
thing. We're not trying to.
mhm.
New 52, I was worried when they said they were going to do Absolute DC initially. I was like, okay, like this sounds cool, but let's not put the cart before the horse. Like, we don't know. No, no one has said that. I'm sorry. No one has said, let's not put the cart before the horse. I don't even know when. What time period am I from? But that's what I was saying. I was just like, because we had New 52, and I was worried that it was going to affect the main continuity. And I mean, it still
Mhm.
could. Don't get me wrong. I'm always here to be ready for something to go weird and me to be like, oh boy, here we go again. But I do have a lot of faith right now that that's not what we're doing. And this is something that is very different in the sense that we're not trying to reshape or change the world or give it a chiropractic adjustment or anything like that. It's really just existing independently of everything. And it's just giving people something fresh that
Mhm.
they can enjoy, or a good jumping on point for people that, maybe the main continuity might be a bit much. Um, like how Ultimates was for Marvel originally back in the day. And I
Mhm.
think that's great. And
No,
I
I
think
would
they're doing
agree.
so many different things, which is cool.
No, I would agree. I think just automatically the fact that it's its own thing separates it. And also the fact that it's much more cohesive and coherent from the start separates it than what happened at the start of the New 52 back in the. It's
Yeah. Well, I mean,
also
the fact
it's
that
not.
it's separate is powerful because it means that, you don't
Mhm.
have to have people coming in being like, oh, well, I hate that you like changed this, or like, oh, but I love this new change. And then us all bickering over what we love or don't
Mhm.
love. And then DC trying
And
to take that all in and make that all work somehow, which is
And
a
I
lot.
don't think that it's just dark for dark's sake either, which was how
No.
I felt about some, not all of the new 52 titles, but some of them. Like it doesn't it the changes I've felt like I can see where they're coming from, even if not all of them I agree with or necessarily like, but it's just like I understand the thought process and there clearly is, a thought process behind it. Also, I need to put this up, which is Edward Alcantara saying, let's not put the skibbity before the Rizzler. That's what you should be saying these
Oh my
days.
goodness.
That's
Oh
clearly
my
what the
gosh.
kids say. Greetings, fellow kids.
Oh my goodness.
Oh. So, oh, I want to tell you about Profane. So, have you heard about
Yes.
Profane?
I have not.
Okay, good. I'm scarred from the one that was low quality. This is Profane. So this is Peter Milligan and Raul Fernandez, and it's a Boom thing. And this is like this. It's an indie thing. It's only going to be like maybe like a mini series, basically. But it's about this like kind of hard boiled noir detective, and he's got that kind of like narration and stuff like that. And this happens in the first issue, so mild spoilers. But like he's investigating this murder, and things start to get kind of weird. Like they get kind of wonky, and at one point he's scrying and he can't remember like where he's been or where he's going, and just like he's
All
having all
right.
this deja vu and these weird things are happening to him, and it culminates with the reveal. And then this is where the story picks up from in the later issues, is that he is a fictional character and his author has been murdered, and he is trying to solve his author's murder, and that's why things are
Ah.
like so messed up for him. And so it goes on then to like, okay, how is he going to do that? What does that mean for him? Like those kind of things, like how can he still exist and all of that kind of stuff.
So it
And
gets
like
really
he
like
then starts to question.
existential and weird.
It does, because then like
That's
he
cool.
starts to question like even like why do I do things? Like do I do things because like I want to? Or is like am I written to do like these things? Like like those kind of things. It's like
Yeah.
it's
Like
interesting,
who's
but it's also
making me
fun.
do this?
And it doesn't get as like and it doesn't get as up its own like butt as it could, in terms of like it's
Mhm.
not pretentious, basically, because like
Right.
those kind of like meta level things can get really like, oh, like let's ponderous and just like that kind of, but it's not. It stays fun, and it keeps that kind of like gritty detective energy throughout. And like
Mhm.
the art inside is like really lovely, and I'm genuinely intrigued as to how it's going to finish off, because it hasn't as of yet, because there is like the mystery of like, well, who did it? It does have the murder mystery element of like, well, like who killed him? And that is important, just as important as everything else going on. It also deals with like some of the shifts in like types of
Mm.
fiction and stuff going on as he starts to encounter kind of other types of detectives who are like written differently, and he's kind of like, are my methods like bad, and stuff like that. So it's really interesting.
So he's like
Like
learning about
I
these
just
other detectives that are like fictional, and he's like, wait a minute.
yeah, and like and so he's questioning like what like am I not popular? like like things like that. And
Does no one like me?
it's like it's really interesting in that way. And I found it really randomly. It was recommended to me through Global Comics, and it was just
Okay.
like, you'll probably like this. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I did. I was like, oh no, it knows me. I don't know why I'm like that. Like, it's a good thing if it's recommending things to me that I like. But at the same time, I'm like, how dare you?
How dare you know who I am? Who do you think you are? Someone that knows me? Well, you do. Yeah, that sounds really interesting, honestly. Honestly, there's quite a few things that I've read from Boom that I've enjoyed. I feel like Boom, like every now and then, is just a good publisher to just check in with and be like, what has Boom got going on?
hmm
They got some good things. That's really cool. I feel like I like how it's you think it's one thing and then it kind of unravels and becomes something weirder than you could have even imagined it is. It's
It
very
gets
cool.
trippy, but not in an impenetrable way.
Yeah.
Like, there are some things that I read, like, I'm really enjoying, but I'm like, I know that other people will find this, like, pretentious and stuff
Right.
like that. But, like, I'm really enjoying it, but will other people?
Yeah.
Tress 504, thank you very much. What are your predictions for All In Punchline? Sometimes I think about All In Punchline or Absolute Punchline, because those would be
I
two very
mean,
different things.
yeah. Is there gonna be a punchline series anytime soon?
I always hope that there'll be more Punchline.
But will there be? That's the question.
That is the question. I
I don't
don't know.
know. I haven't heard
Like,
any plans to do anything, but I think people will
I'm
be here
always
for
I
it.
live in hope. I live in
Yeah.
hope that Punchline will not be forgotten, because I genuinely think the character's cool. So I'm like 2 videos away from a full-blown cosplay, so it's just happening. Every time she comes back, we get closer and closer to it
Closer and
actually
closer to
happening.
it.
So I'm trying to think, what else did I read? Oh, like I'm catching up on Something is Killing the Children,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
how is
where
that
they're
going?
it's right now, like I have the one recent one just came out, so I need to read it. I have it, but I haven't read it as of yet. But I've read the entire arc leading up to it, which is the On the Road arc, which is they've just been doing a series of like standalone issues with Erica in like different points of like her past with the House of Slaughter and different adventures fighting monsters and stuff like that. And that's been fun. And I like that it's come out now rather than at the beginning, which was initially how the series was, how we thought about the series was that it was going to
Mm.
be these kind of standalone adventures, but it ended up developing into like this massive arc that just kept going. And but now that they've had those two really big main arcs and now they're kind of taking this breather with these on the road issues, I think they mean a bit more because we know so much more about Erica as a character that when she's going through these things and we're seeing these moments, you can kind of slot in a bit more like when it's happening to her and like where she is emotionally and like what it means. Like there's an issue with her and her brother that I really liked, where just like knowing what happens with that relationship and where it goes is just a really kind of sweet kind of filler issue. And like sometimes it's nice to have that breather. You know, like those
Yeah,
little
it is.
standalone issues sometimes are fun.
So is it told like out of sequence? Like it's just kind of like
For
random,
the
like
last few, for the
okay,
last couple of issues, it's just been hopping
cool,
around to like
cool.
different points of like her journey fighting these monsters.
How far is this series in now? Because this has been Something is Killing the Children has been recommended to me
We are
multiple
40 issues
times.
in. So
40 issues into this series?
yes.
Into the
No, not
series.
not, into, not yeah, into all of them. And then there are the spin-offs. So then there's also the House of Slaughter spin-off and
Yeah.
then the Books of Slaughter, like one shots that they've been doing. And Hello Darkness also had a little short story in it as well.
Right. I think that's the thing that I find so daunting about it. It's just that I know there's all the spin-offs and then I'm like, man, I want to read this, but like do I have to read the spin-offs or like where
Not
is that? I mean, I
really.
guess I don't have to. I could just it's probably just if you want to read the spin-offs, then they're
The
there for you
House of
as like
Slaughter
extra.
spinoff, it's interesting because it's like it branches out more characters. Like they each house like arc focuses on a character. So like the first one was about Aaron, like the next one's about like the butcher and stuff like that. So it's like you're kind of getting like chunks of like
Right.
different parts of the lore and history with House of Slaughter, whereas the Something is Killing the Children is following that main like Erica arc of like we know where she's going and all of that kind of stuff, which does have a bunch of the lore about the house, but it's that kind of spinoff is breaking off more on some of those side characters type thing.
Mm.
So I ended up like when I got into it, it was the kind of thing where it was already going when I jumped into it, but I jumped into it around the end of the first arc, and it was the kind of thing that I found like fairly easy to just kind of like power through, basically.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I do want to read it. So I feel like I should. And I liked what I read of the first few issues. I thought it was
Hmm.
really good. So I feel like it would be nice to jump into that at some point. At some point. I don't know when that
I know there's so
time.
I know that's like when is the point
When
because
is the
there's
point? Yeah.
Kumo
Yeah.
Chabalala is asking, are y'all gonna check out Imbo Kodo, the image book? I actually haven't heard of
I
that.
haven't heard of that one.
So
You stumped both of us. So I don't know. Gold star for you.
why am I like hitting things? I'm searching it and I'm hitting things. Oh, here we go.
Ooh, this looks cool. I like the cover.
I see it from Dark Horse.
Yeah, I see it from Dark Horse too.
It does
Hmm.
look interesting though. I hadn't heard of it. That's the thing. There's so many things out there and I still haven't heard of like so many of them. Like a bunch of
That's
stuff
like
came out this week and I
I
need
was
to still do
also
it.
when I was playing Dragon Age, I was talking to people about the story, and I was talking about how, speaking of Dark Horse, they had a Dragon Age comic, and that they did that's like in between Inquisition and Veilguard, and people were
Mhm.
like, I didn't even know that happened. I was like, yeah, I feel like they didn't really tell anyone. The only reason that like I know is just because I am like I am deeper in comics, and
Mhm.
because I'm like a major Dragon Age fan. So when I heard about it, I was like, oh, I gotta get that. But that's the thing. There's so much going on. It's hard to keep up. I really like this cover though. This seems pretty
Hmm.
cool. And it's like, ooh, Afrofuturism, and we got like a whole like world and empire it sounds like it's building. It sounds pretty sick, to be honest. But it's not on my radar. Well, now it is.
No, Afrofuturism
So we're
is
checking it out.
interesting. There's lots of actually pretty cool Nigerian literature that's starting to get translated and stuff. Like there's a really cool
Nice.
sci-fi scene out there that now it's starting to like trickle out and be translated into more languages and stuff. And it's like, yeah,
That's cool. Yeah, I
more
do like
stuff for people to read.
Afrofuturism as a genre usually. So maybe I will have to if I see an issue 1, maybe I'll have to add it to the pile. And it's coming out soon, looks like. It's coming out like in a couple weeks. Hmm. Hmm. Cool suggestion. Also, my apologies to everyone who has redeemed channel points on Twitch. None of my Twitch chat has actually been coming through StreamYard, so just know I'm not ignoring any. I'm never ignoring anyone. If we don't talk about the chat,
Hmm.
it's just because we're focused on chatting and there's a lot of chat.
It's
But
supposed to. The
yeah,
technology is supposed to filter all
it's
the things
supposed to give us all the
through.
things. It's a lie. It's not giving us. It doesn't always give us all the things, but I'm sure it's doing its best. You know.
Also, the internet's been kind of wonky on like my end, so it's like cut out a
Mm,
couple of times. So it's
I
been
think
like,
it's. I think it's just like because it's all connected. I'm
hmm.
doing them now though. I hydrated and I stretched. And Angelus, I have eaten. I'm eating cheesecake right now. That's what I've been eating throughout this stream. In case you guys were wondering, I have Cheesecake Factory here.
Oh,
It's
nice.
Reese's
Oh, nice.
cheesecake. It's almost gone. And I also had like a good brunch this morning, and I had some cookies. And I had some chicken. So I've actually eaten today. That is a channel that's people can redeem points to ask me if I've eaten because I am notorious for working and just like totally forgetting that my
Hmm.
body requires sustenance, and then I'll be like, I'm ravenous.
Yeah, I do the
Dante
same
has
thing.
redeemed
It's like
snacks. Fair
sometimes
enough.
you get into the zone. It's not even
I got
intentional.
snacks.
So it's like, yeah, I do that too. Where sometimes I try and just keep snacks around. So it's like
Yeah.
you can be like, oh yeah, like I can eat the food that is around me in some kind of capacity.
Yeah, being like,
So
wait, where's that food that I need? Yeah, Dante just redeemed snacks. I do have a snack here, so I will keep it here and I will munch on it. It's an uncrustable, so thank you, Dante, for the snacks. Yeah. You also had another indie series, didn't you? This is
oh
what we were
yeah,
talking about last time. So we were
yes,
talking about
I
this
was.
and then Absolute Batman?
Yeah, like I think I mentioned last time the moon is following us.
You did. I
Yes.
said, what was that thing you said before? Because I need to read it. I haven't read it yet. But I also haven't read Rook Exodus, and I also need to read that one based on your recommendation and based on
No,
Ducks.
like I'm still really enjoying the moon is following us. And I think that in the second issue it got even stronger than the first. I'm very invested in the moon is
Mmm.
following us and the quest of these
Really?
parents to save their daughter who's fallen into like this mysterious sleep, and they're kind of like going in to like try and save her into like this fantasy realm of her own making. And it's just it's really heartwarming. And just the way that like they're written and the art that they're using, they're both they're two artists, and like because Daniel Warren Johnson then also Riley Rossmo, and they're kind of swapping between like the different stuff that they're doing depending upon where they are in the worlds in the book. And it really works. And like I really like Rossmo's like highly stylized art, and I think it really suits certain things. And I
Mm-hmm.
think this is one of those things. I think the first thing I ever saw Rossmo do before I knew like who he was the Martian Manhunter series. And I just thought that was so cool with like the way the aliens were drawn and that kind of stuff. And like it always really stuck with
Oh,
me.
I love this art. It's very cool. Just taking
No,
a little peek at some of it.
like
It's
it's
so stylized, but
it
it
does.
really
It's like
feels like it fits the vibe of what you're describing.
it gives the series like a really fun, unique kind of feel. And it's like I like that. It's like sometimes I get why people don't vibe with it in like a mainline book, especially if it's not a kind of out there character or a kind of more fantasy feeling character. But in general, like I really like it.
I feel like it really depends, right? Like it just depends on what is the vibe of the book, what is the tone
Yeah.
of the book. But there's definitely a time and place for that type of art. Just like if you were to have something that is more mainline art style in a book like this, it actually would, I think, work against that. So it's really, you want to make sure your art matches the story and the story
Mm-hmm.
matches the art and all of that stuff. I don't think it's easy
Mm-hmm.
to do.
No, like it's a real like it's really beautiful when all of that lines up. Do you want to? Shall we give the people Batman?
Yes.
It's been
Let's
so
talk about
long now. I think
Batman.
we're almost at issue 2, you know, for absolute
Are
Batman.
we?
We get to
When
see
is
the
that coming
giant
out?
Bat Dozer soon. So
I'm excited for the Bat Dozer. I'm excited. The great thing is, I'm really excited for all of these freaking absolute books and the issue twos.
yeah, it's the
And
13th.
then they
Yeah.
announced more, and I was like, oh no, these also all sound good. I was like, oh no, oh no, what will I pick? I want
Hmm.
all of it. I mean, I probably will get all of it, even though it feels like a betrayal because I'm not getting all of the X-Men books. But look, X-Men has too many books at this point. That's the problem with
It
X-Men.
does.
You can't get all of them. That's like 30 books or something. I don't even know how many we have. A lot. But Absolute at least will still only be like 6 books. So that's manageable. That's doable. Once we get to the
Hmm.
next round, then I might have to be like, okay,
It's like now we need to pick and choose.
some of these might have to go. Yeah. I can't keep all of them, but we'll see what the next round holds in store. But yeah, let's talk about Absolute Batman. How did you feel about this origin for Batman?
I like it. I do like it. I understand the rationale of updating it to a kind of event that feels more in keeping with things that happen more like time of recording. Even though it's not to say people still don't get mugged, you know, walking home and stuff like that, because
I mean,
they
they do.
do. They definitely do. But I think that the kind of visuals and imagery and what it was trying to conjure, I think is something that feels more like updated and modern while still in keeping with the, in my opinion, one of the core things with it just being a thing that happens. I've always been of the mindset that I think that his story resonates more when it's just, you know, a thing that's just, you know, like he's just out, you know, with his family doing whatever. Maybe he's walking home from a movie, maybe he's on a class trip, and then just, you know, something happens and it changes his life. But like, what do you think about it?
Um, I loved the way that the symbol of the bat was incorporated
Hmm.
into the origin here. And I feel like it's by far one of the strongest uses I have ever seen of that in
Hmm.
anything that I've read for Batman, because I just feel like it has so much more of a meaning when literally the safe haven that you were in
Hmm.
is where the bats were. So in a
Yeah.
way, bats don't just represent this idea of fear. It is out. There's also a thing of comfort with it,
Yeah.
and I loved how that it's also kind of incorporated in the sense of like prime Earth Batman has this bat cave. This Batman goes up to these big
Hmm.
skyscrapers where rich people just don't even use those spaces to look down and like watch everyone.
Hmm.
This difference of kind of like being like underneath and kind of being tucked away and like looking up versus
Hmm.
like being above everything and kind of looking down on it as a
Hmm.
protector. It just gives you, it's so interesting because there's so many subtle things in this book that just flip,
Hmm.
but it gives you a whole other perspective on the character while still allowing the character to be who he is,
Yes.
which
And
is
that was
really
like,
amazing.
yeah,
Very
I was really
nuanced
impressed by
things.
that.
Yeah.
Like, I was really impressed by how you could do so many of those things, but still retain, you know, what makes the character. And also, I liked how fun the book was. Like, I found the book fun in some of its moments of excess. Like, I know that for some, like, they're a bit too much and leaning too much into the edgy, but I thought that that was it, having a good time and kind of reaching out, in my opinion, to potentially a bit of a younger base. And I don't mean that in terms of like, oh, like kids are immature and stuff. I just mean like in terms of reaching out for that kind of level of like, hey, like this is like a story you're gonna get invested in, like, you know, it's an axe and it's coming off and it's chopping hands and like, you know, all of those kind of things. I felt there was a kind of like childlike joy in that I related to. Like, I liked it, even though it's dark. And I know that it's dark and it's kind of thing, but I'm like, it's its own thing, doing its thing in its own space. And it's not repurposing something to try and twist into something it's not. And the way that it drew inspiration from like The Dark Knight Returns, but kind of, you know, brought it into a bit of a kind of lighter and less, you know, kind of, I'm trying to think of how to describe The Dark Knight Returns, because I'm actually one of those people who, while I respect The Dark Knight Returns a lot, it's not one of my favorite, you know, comics out there in
Mm-hmm.
terms of being enjoyable to read.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and this is like, this loves it. And I think that like this brought that forward without making it into just a copy or like full on pastiche of that thing. And like that was another thing that impressed me about it, because it was so clearly also inspired by so many elements of it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I feel like there is a boldness. There's excitement in this book, and that's what I
mhm,
really love about it. Like, it's not afraid to give us this really powerful moment of joy, this rush of excitement when you're reading the book that I don't think the other two have in the same way. And
mhm,
that's not to say that, obviously, I've already said that DC, absolute DC, for me, Wonder Woman is still my
mhm,
favorite. Uh but it doesn't have the same level of excitement as this book for me.
mhm.
And something that I really enjoyed is that with these big moments, I found myself like giddy reacting to this book as I was reading it. Like there is this childlike wonder that I think it just even brings out in you as like a long time reader of comics.
Like this one, I laughed. Like I laughed at one moment in Wonder Woman 2, but not because of like, it was the disconnect for me of them actually putting yeet on the page is what I laughed
Mm-hmm.
at in Wonder Woman. But like for me, like I laughed at this moment where they
Yeet.
subverted that kind of like trope of like, you don't really want to do this, son. Put down the gun. And then he just blasts him in the face with little batarangs. Like I laughed out loud. So it was so sassy.
So sassy. I
I was like,
love the
oh,
sass.
like the more obvious sense of humor, because Batman has a sense of humor. It's just, it's kind of twisted. So I was like, oh, like they're like playing with that in this. That's fun.
Yeah, the battering shotgun was really fun and really great. I mean, there's expectations that it plays with that are just very entertaining, and where you think you know where it's going to go and then it takes you somewhere a little bit different with Absolute Batman, that I really admired about this book. And I really found that there is definitely um there's I think this is the one that's kind of doing the most interesting stuff right now with character in some ways. Like just
Yeah, I would
the
agree
who
with
the
that.
person is. Yeah.
I would agree with that. Where I feel like Superman's doing the most with the world, I feel like this is doing the most with the characters. And I feel like Wonder Woman for me was playing more in
Wonder
terms of
Woman's
like
more of the
where it could go with the
mythos.
concept. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
concept of it.
It's like
So,
ideas, and I
mhm,
think the characters will come out of that. And I think in Superman, it's like we're kind of going big to go small. So I think all of those things are still going to cook in a similar way. But this
mhm.
is like leading with character. This is like, this is Batman. This is what's up. He's got hooks and stuff. He's completely nuts. Bats are they're batty, and that is, I love that element too. I love how they
Yeah.
just embrace the insanity that is Batman.
Yes.
And while that has been a core part of Batman for me forever, I feel like we don't often get to see that like put into words. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously more recently in comics we have got to see that explored and put into words. But in terms of in general with the character, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that is something that writers either choose to explore or not explore. So having it in an issue one where it's kind of an inherent part is very fun. And it just lets me know that, like, okay, we're just going to get wild. And I'm so ready to just...
Yes. Ben Chan, thank you very much. Which do you guys think has been more successful artistically, From the Ashes or DC All In?
Ooh,
Oh,
Ben
artistically
hitting
could mean a couple of things.
Marvel versus DC. Sneaky little Marvel versus DC question. Love it. Yeah, artistic can mean many different things.
Because I'm like artistic, like you could mean like the actual like artistry, like the way like it's drawn or written, like, or do you mean like conceptually in terms of which is taking the most risk, like in terms of like provocation for those who believe that art must challenge, or like it's just
Yeah,
I.
like, are you talking about a specific concept of artistic, or are you saying like in general artistry of storytelling?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
For
We'll wait for
me,
that clarification, maybe.
and it's not just because I lean more DC, because I won't pretend that I don't, because I do. And that's not to say that I don't like Marvel, because I do as well. I just tend to gravitate more towards DC titles. But because I have been reading the Ultimate stuff and those kind of things as well. But I've been able to put those more aside than I have the DC ones, because I feel like the DC ones are taking the bigger risks. Whereas, like you were saying earlier, like a lot of like the X stuff feels like we're going back to like, the way things were, or like those kind of things, or like the Ultimates,
Mm.
even the ones I really like, are getting into a position where some of them feel a bit meandery, or like we're taking time and I'm not sure where we're going anymore with some of them.
Right.
And like maybe I'll feel that way in like a year with these. I don't know. But like, but right now it just feels like, to me, it just feels like DC is trying so hard. Like, I'm just like, I feel the effort in terms of not just the books, but in terms of like the marketing, and like everybody's going out and like doing interviews and like doing all these things and trying to get people hype and like, like, oh my God, order it. And like for me, like that makes an impact. And I notice those things. And I'm just kind of like, and to me, because I am in the space, I'm so involved with everything, that kind of gets wrapped up in it. And I'm just kind of like, I'm seeing the effort. And then I'm also seeing that effort play out on the page as well in lots of the different books in terms of the passion behind it. Another place I see that is Ghost Machine, like in terms of lots of the
Mm.
things they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just I see that. And when I read some of the Marvel books, I don't feel that way about as many of them, like personally. What about you? Because I know you lean more Marvel than I do.
Well, I mean, I like to think that I'm pretty balanced, but I mean, Marvel does have, they got X-Men, so they got me for life. I can't. X-Men is like, I mean, that's what brought me, I think, really into the comic book world, other than the 60s Spider-Man cartoon that I always
Mhm.
talk about. Um so yeah, I do tend to lean maybe a little bit more Marvel because of that. See, here's the thing. Ben
Mhm.
added creatively satisfying reading experience as an initiative. Question mark. Um, it's an initiative. See, I think as an initiative, I'd go with DC if we're
Mhm.
adding that. I think the other thing that's important to consider, though, here is it is a little hard to compare these right now because From the Ashes is like a bit down the road at this point. Like, we got a lot of books. There's a lot that's happened. I haven't read all of it at this
Yeah.
point. Whereas DC, like, I mean, I guess if we're talking All In, I mean, it's still kind of just started. But All In is a lot of stuff that we kind of have already had moving forward with some new things that are coming out of that.
Mhm.
And Absolute just started. So we only have 3 books so far, issue ones.
Mhm.
But I mean, I would say at this point, I don't know if I would say more hyped about Absolute DC, but I think because it's newer, I'm just like, I'm
There
in the
is that
early
factor too.
stages.
Yeah, there is
When
that
From the
factor too.
Ashes started, I was like this too. I was like, I was just, my eyes had stars in them and I was so excited to read everything. And I'm still reading a lot of stuff, very
Mhm.
excited to read it. So I would say just in terms of like if we ignore the initiative part of that, which I know that is not what you said, Ben, but if I were to ignore the initiative part, I would probably go Marvel just because
Mm-hmm.
I'm really enjoying From the Ashes and I really love coming to these books and just being surprised every issue with where we go when I
Mm-hmm.
think I know what's happening, and then I'm like, man, they found a way to just make it feel fresh but make it feel comfy at the same time, which is in itself an artistry.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you that I think DC is taking more risk here. And I think they really are. I mean, I think it's called the All In initiative for a reason because they really are throwing everything into it. And they really
Mm-hmm.
want, not that it's like a final stand, as they've said, it's not like they're going anywhere, but it's
Mm-hmm.
more of just like, let's like do something big. Like, let's just remind people of why we matter, of why we are a titan in the industry. And I think a really cool thing that they're doing with that is taking these characters that are so iconic. Because this is the thing, people always say like, I lean more Marvel, and
Mm-hmm.
I agree, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, Batman is like a core of my being. Like Batman is also like just one of my first superhero
Mm-hmm.
loves. I think I don't even remember which came first, X-Men or Batman, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it might have actually even been Batman. I think the movies when I was younger just
Yeah.
really the Tim Burton films really stuck with me. Um so I don't know. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think I got to give it to DC though based on the full premise.
It's like, and one of the things, and like this is something that like I've never really liked the rivalry aspect between them. I know some people find it very fun and they enjoy it and they're like, yes, that's a good part. I'm like, there's a good thing about the spirit of healthy competition. I do think that
Oh,
it's good. Like
100%.
those
Yeah.
things push you, and that's
They
really
motivate
great.
each other in ways, and that's what's so
But
good about having
I've
DC and
never
Marvel
liked the
together.
whole like you got to pick one or like one's better than the other, like those kind of things. I'm just like, for me, that's the part of it I don't like because I'm like,
Mm,
I like both, and whether I lean more one way at one period or another because it switches sometimes too. Like
yeah.
there's been periods where I've been way more into Marvel than DC and stuff like that. So it can switch depending upon what's going on. I just think there's merit in checking out the comics in general. And sometimes I find it happens way less now, but sometimes I find that people get mired in like, like the make mine Marvel or like we're all like, those kind of things. I'm like, I think there's
I mean, you
merit to
can read
both.
both. That's the thing, right? Like we can
There's
you don't
really
have to
cool
pick
stuff happening in both
in
right
both of
now.
these. I would also
Like,
say that I think if we were going to compare the two, I would say we should actually probably be comparing the Ultimate line with the Absolute because I feel like Ultimate is actually doing
mhm,
something that is more creatively like interesting per se in terms
mhm,
of like an artistic pursuit. Uh but like From the Ashes is still, not to say that From the Ashes isn't art. There's a lot of really good art happening in these books and a
mhm.
lot of really amazing stories. And obviously, I understand, Ben, that you want to pit those two against each other because it's like kind of like
It's
the
fun. Like I
Sash's
get it. It's
stuff
like
versus my stuff. So I get it. And I appreciate it. And From the
it's like
Ashes is still, I'm still liking it
it can be fun
a
and I
lot.
enjoy discussing it on intellectual level, like, ooh, like what are they both doing and like that kind of stuff. It's just
Yeah.
from my early forum days, I've been in way too many conversations where it like ends up in some strange places. And I'm like, oh no. Like
Yeah.
we've
Well,
gone
I
too
mean, I
far.
think the nice thing is this is a place where you can ask those questions and it be a safe question to ask because it's not like one of us is going to be like, yeah, like down with Marvel or anything like that. Like that's not what we're saying. We're not saying, like ideally if you have the ability to support both, I would say support both. And I would say beyond all that, like please support like smaller publishers that honestly really need your money because they are smaller and they are
There
often
is
doing
so much really cool stuff
crazy
happening
creative stuff
in the
that
indie space. Like
yeah,
so much cool stuff, you
yeah,
know?
like a lot of really good and like not even just like publishers, like there's people that like independently publish stuff and like they
Mhm.
kickstart things, and we're living in a space where like people can really do whatever they want, and the one thing is the bigger you get, the harder I think it gets to be um more creatively liberated because
Mhm.
there's so many other things that those companies have to think about. Not in a bad way, just
Mhm.
it
It's just
is, that is
different.
what it is. Also, Logan, welcome to the Golden Fang Gang. Thank you for becoming a member. Thank you.
Balls Monkey, thank you very much, is saying Absolute DC is the advantage of being out of continuity. So there's more mystery around what they have planned.
Yes, I would agree with that. That is a good observation. That's why I think Ultimate is an interesting thing to compare.
Yes.
Because Ultimate also has that element of like, we don't really, there's so many things that I feel like we don't really know what's going to happen.
And Ultimate has done a lot of really interesting things too. Like even just having Ultimate X-Men as a book is like, you know, a huge thing. And I love Ultimate X-Men. And I'm so glad that they did that because I think it's really interesting and fun. And even though it is very distinct and different from the rest of the line, like I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I mean, look, Ultimate X-Men, when that book came out too, there were so many people that I think were not sure what to make of it. And now I've also been seeing a lot of people like coming around and being like, wait a minute, this book is like so good. And I'm like, yes, finally people seeing the merit. I think it's also interesting though, because, you know, when we do something that is this different, like with what DC is doing with All In, what Marvel is doing with the Ultimate line, there is a level of like how far can you go with it? It's really finding out like where that line is. I think DC is like right up against the line, but is smartly knowing what to like hold on to and what to like push forward in a really like, oh, it's just so smart what they're doing, and it's not easy to figure out where that space is. So I think they're doing it in a way that is also better, for lack of a more accurate word there. I'm just going to say better, because you can alienate people when you do things that are different and lose people to that. And I think we've seen some of that happen with some of the Ultimate stuff, like X-Men. Although, you know, people are coming back in now, so they came back in, and
and I think you do still see that, but just in less numbers with the like Absolute stuff. Because I know there are people who are just not interested at all. They do not care, and they're like, "Why?
I think there's some
Why
people
do you
that
care
just have
so much?"
burnout on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and they're just like, it's like, this is just the same. Like, I've seen a lot of people that say like, "Oh, I've already seen this like a million times."
Yeah,
and I'm like, "Well, but I don't know if you've seen this exact thing." And they're like, "No, I've seen everything." And I'm like, "Okay, well."
But it's like, it's also like, I totally get that. Like some people are just like, because like I say at the end of my thing, like sometimes something just doesn't grab you. And you're just like, I just don't care. And it's like, you know, it's like sometimes that can just be where you're at. Logan, thank you very much. Just because I like hanging out with you guys.
Oh, Logan, thank you. That is so kind of you.
No, we like hanging out with all of you. And I think we've actually been the most structured. I think we've like,
this is the most structured we've ever been. We've been like passing the ball back and forth. I've been trying to also like, you say something that makes me think of something, then I'm like, just wait, just hold on. I'm gonna wait till you stop. Yeah, this has been a very structured stream. This was good. I'm
entirely gonna thank the visual aids. I'm like, even though we didn't use a lot of them, it's the fact that they were there.
It just gives us something in our mind to be like, this is what I'd also like to thank the physical books that I have beside me. It helped to keep me grounded. Even though I don't have any of my Absolute with me. In case you guys are wondering, I do have Absolute. My Superman is still in my bin. I read it digitally. My Wonder Woman and Batman are not with me. They're with Duck. I gave Duck Batman out of the kindness of my heart. Because I was like, this book belongs with you. But Wonder Woman belonged with me and I forgot to grab it. So I don't have it. Oh my goodness. I think, you know, Victor, I think you bring up a good point. Victor just said over in my YouTube chat, I think the Penguin, wait, I
can pull him up here.
Can you do that? Oh,
yeah,
wow, you have the magic. Yeah, this is an interesting statement because I think there's so many things right now that are really like bringing everyone into comics, and I think the Penguin is part of it. I definitely think Agatha All Along, which just happened, is part of it. I think Agatha All Along is also bringing people back into the MCU in a way that I was not expecting, and I am very excited about. And I don't know. I'm gonna remain cautiously optimistic, but we may be starting to see a bit of a not maybe not an end, but like a waning of, you know, the superhero fatigue that people have had. I think people are getting excited again for stuff. And also, you know, I still haven't reacted to it. I got to after this stream, guys, I'm going to react to it. People were telling me there's a new Civil War trailer, or not Civil War. What am I talking about?
Thunderbolts?
Captain America, Brave New World.
Oh, I don't see. I'm
Brave New
not even
World.
up on like what has trailers and like what doesn't.
Thunderbolts 2. You're right. You got it.
Okay, I'm
Thunderbolts
not
and Brave New
entirely out
World
of it.
both have new trailers apparently. So I got to watch those. But I think, you know, Thunderbolts is another thing that's bringing people in, and I just think there's so much. And then, you know, X-Men 97 happened. I think that brought a lot of
X-Men
people in.
97 drove a lot of interest, and that was such a fun time. That was just really fun.
I miss
like
it.
to
I
to
miss it.
cover that and like see all the wrecks and the people being excited to like go back and read those things. Like that was really fun.
And it's definitely doing something because I mean, you look at the letters columns for From the Ashes, and so many people are like, I didn't even know nothing about this. I watched X-Men 97. I came to my shop. I said, what do you got? Like,
hmm
I'll grab this NYX book. I'll grab this Uncanny X-Men, whatever. And these people that, you know, have still loved these characters though. And that's the thing. I think we're just seeing a lot of people starting to bridge the gap between like, you know, you can be a fan of something on a screen and also you can read the book. You can do one or the other. Like
It's
I
because
think barriers are coming down, and it's
because there's
beautiful.
always been a relationship between like the two and how people come to them. And so it's just I feel like in general, like I've said it before, like to you, to other people, I just feel in general there's just an excited vibe in the comic space right now. And it's
Mhm.
just it's fun, you know, to be
There's a
part of
lot to
it.
be excited about. Like that's the great thing. It's like, and not everyone is excited about the same things. Like we're all excited sometimes about the
Mhm.
same stuff, sometimes about different stuff. Uh it is great, and it's awesome to see the fact that there's so many new readers coming in that
Mhm.
feel that they can come in, because it can be intimidating, and I'm glad that people are not getting intimidated and
Yeah, and I'm
feeling like they
glad that
can
like they're
just jump
coming
in.
in like now when there's so much exciting, you know, interesting things, you know,
Coming
happening
in
for people
looking
to try
for
out.
absolute DC trades, and
Yeah.
and just being like, I don't know,
It's
I
too
guess we'll just
early.
take a peek. Like that is very cool, because that
Mhm.
means that, you know, we're doing some good things in the industry, I think.
Yeah, it means that like you're getting like general interest. And that's like that's always really fun, you know?
It is really fun. It's more people you get to talk about comics with.
Exactly. And I
Yeah,
always love that. I love
me
seeing like the new
too.
people come in and be like, "Ooh, like what is all this about?" And it's like that's really cool. And I love seeing different people's perspectives. That's one of the things I love about having the channel is that you get to hear from people you wouldn't otherwise hear from, you know? And I'm like,
Oh,
that's really cool.
I love also when people just like discovered something and you get to hear about like their first journey through reading something that like maybe you've known about this story for like a
Mhm.
while, and then they're like, "Oh my gosh." And then, you know, when Rogue like looked at Gambit like this, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, like what's happening?" I'm just like, this is I love this so much. It
Mhm.
allows me to feel like I get to relive the first time feels
Mhm.
through other people's experiences, and I just love hearing the excitement that people have. And you know, as you read more and more, I think it's easy to become a little bit more jaded. So I feel like new readers are kind of also needed to help like lighten the mood sometimes,
Yeah,
because
a
like I'll
hundred
get
percent.
jaded. So
No, 100% because, like, I've also had that thought sometimes of, like, "Oh, I've seen this," you know, like,
yeah,
been
like
there,
whatever.
like, you know, read that,
Or
but
like, you know, someone comes, like someone dies, and you're like, okay, we'll see them like next week.
yeah.
Whatever. Like, Like everyone's crying on the page, and you're like, yeah. Can't
And
believe they
it's
did that.
it's easy to forget this. Like everybody's coming from different reference points. That's why I always try and remind myself, like everybody's coming from different reference points, different experiences, different things. For some people, this is the first time. For some people, this is the first time with this type of story. Like there are so many different types of things
Yeah,
you're going to get. And I just think that's really interesting to have so many people coming to it from a different, vantage point. It's really cool.
100%.
But it's also 12:30. So
We should go to bed. We should go to
we
bed.
should. We should eat more food and go to bed and do those
should.
kind of things.
More snacks and more
Yeah.
sleep is always good. Well, more snacks. I'm gonna do some trailer reactions really quick, and then I'll go to bed.
You need to sleep.
I will. I'll sleep when the reactions are done. And if anyone ever sees me in a video and is wondering what's going on with me, I'm probably just tired, to be honest with you. I got up this morning and I started working. I started getting some stuff together to film videos. And
Isn't
then
this
I did
your
like
third
a stream.
stream?
It's my third stream, yeah, of the day. And I filmed like 2 videos today. I'm gonna film 2 more before I go to bed.
You're a machine.
Yeah, so in case anyone's ever wondering, if you're watching my reactions and I seem a little like crazy, that's why. But also I am just crazy, so that's also why.
Dragonberry Meads, thank you very much. Says go to bed and eat food. We will. Well, thank you everybody so much. And of course, we'll be back together at some point to discuss more things. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out and chatting all the various comic things. We'll leave this up as always. You can follow me, you can follow Amanda, you can do all the things. So yes, we will go and sleep and eat. All right. Bye.
Go and sleep and eat. All right. Have a good night, guys. Bye. Bye.